and welcome to the Thursday, December 16, 2021 regular meeting of the school committee. We have just returned from executive session and we're calling the meeting back to order. For those who are here that would like to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, we can do that now. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right, so the first thing we have is an opportunity for public comment. I do not see any public here wishing to comment, but we can move into recognitions. Anybody have any recognitions? If you have any.
I think I just want to recognize all of the administrators, nurses, teachers, custodians, cafeteria workers, paraprofessionals, administrative assistants, technicians. I hope I'm not missing anyone because I'll tell you right now, people are working harder than they ever have. There's an awful lot going on. So thank you to all of those people.
And also just wanted, I did not say this at the beginning, but we have Jessie Ainelli, who is our student body representative here remotely over, we can see, I don't know if the camera can see her, but over there. So we want to go ahead. Are you ready to start with the student council update?
Yes, for sure. Hello everyone, I'm Jessie Ainelli, as is mentioned, and I'm a senior on student council this year. So at the high school, we've definitely been continuing with our mask optional trial this week for vaccinated students and staff, and we have had an uptick in cases recently, but I know that will be touched on later. On other news, we had our first home basketball game on Tuesday night, which was exciting. The boys beat Westboro 79-45, so that was an awesome game. And also on Tuesday night, junior Sean Golemblowski set 2 school records for indoor track in the 55-meter hurdles and the high jump, so that was awesome. We also have our winter concerts coming up with concert band and jazz ensemble on December 20th and chorus and orchestra on the 22nd. And finally, Relay for Life has their cookie decorating fundraiser this Saturday in the high school cafeteria from 12 to 2. So definitely check that out if you're interested. That's all I have for the high school, but if you have any questions, I would love to answer.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Jessie.
Of course.
Thank you. Always good to hear what's going on at the high school. So that moves us then into our financial report.
Thank you. So the financial report that is in your packet indicates that we are running right now 740 negative variance. As we spoke about earlier with the last financial report, the negative balance or variance is really payroll driven. We've had additional FTEs that have been hired. Most are being covered by grants. With the exception of the social emotional learning director, which is partially covered by a grant. And this payroll variance will continue to fluctuate throughout the year as it does every year. On the expense side, out of district tuition has increased by almost $700,000 at this time. As we've discussed before, students need change throughout the year and annually, and again, this number may continue to change. At this time, the increase will be covered by grants and an increase in circuit breaker. The other expense line that has changed is the special education transportation. At this time, Accept Collaborative is unable to hire drivers and provide transportation for many of our runs. So there's an estimated credit due for the transportation. And this has helped to offset our negative variance that we're running at this time. So, again, we're not quite halfway through the fiscal year at this time. So it's something that we will continue to watch. Supply chain continues to be an issue with getting supplies in for various reasons. So that's where we are right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. The $700,000, just to go back to that, is that included in the number we already have for next year's budget?
So most of the changes have already been captured for next year's budget, but we will continue to watch and make sure that our budget has covered anything that has changed.
Other questions? That moves us into the superintendent's report, and I just, it had been a request from Leah earlier. I don't know if you had COVID stuff in your report, but do you want to hold that? Is that okay to hold that off to the COVID discussion, or do you have stuff that you want to put specific to?
I can hold it to the COVID discussion, or I can do it now and we can move the COVID, the masking. I don't know how you want, I can do whatever.
I'd like to hear it both times, because it
Okay.
takes a while to sink in sometimes,
Perfect.
if that's all right with you guys.
All right, so this is the superintendent's report for December 16th, 2021. Just a really quick update on where we are with enrollment. You know, one of the things that we keep trying to emphasize is that over the course of a year, kids just continue to trickle in. I think the last time I presented this was on November 18th, and you can see that we were at 89 students net, and we had budgeted for 72, and so if you look at where we are today, we're at 93. So we're only 4 students to the good, but they continue to trickle into us. This is the part where I will be talking about some COVID-19 things, and just so you know, the information on this slide are things that were shared with me by Sean McAuliffe, as well as stuff that we know as well from being in the schools. So one of the things that Sean has said is that 91% of our students have ages 5 to 11 have actually received their first vaccine. So that's fantastic. And over 70% of them have received their second vaccine. So if you were a student who took part in the vaccination clinic that was sponsored sort of mutually by the schools and public health, you will officially be vaccinated on Saturday, 2 days from today. So that is great news, I think, and I think by the time we come back from winter break, we should be in a place where probably over 90% of our kids are actually fully vaccinated, ages 5 to 11. So that's great news. Everyone in the community, I'm sure, has been hearing about school outbreak. And on the next slide, I'll show you where we are in terms of the dashboard. What we need to remember is that these cases are appearing to derive from a pretty fast-moving and highly contagious Delta variant. So what we're seeing is that from the time of exposure to the onset of symptoms, it feels like the incubation period has been a little shorter than what we've sort of traditionally seen. 98% of the kids who are testing positive are fully vaccinated, which is, I think, an interesting statistic. And then this last bullet, I think, is the one that is really important, because I'm concerned that parents are at home thinking that, you know, there's COVID spreading all over our classrooms, and that would not be accurate. The cases that we are seeing are primarily tied to athletics and out-of-school activities at this point in time. Now, when you look at the next slide, you'll see that we have 15 positive cases right now at Hopkinton High School, and that's a lot of cases. And having had a conversation today with the school nurse at the high school, it is very likely that that number is going to go up significantly tomorrow. So while I cannot say at this point in time that we haven't seen in-classroom spread, I mean, I can't definitively say that because they'll still be doing contact tracing for additional cases. But right now, what you're seeing has come about because of sort of weekend activities or athletics or social activities. That is predominantly the way in which this virus is being transmitted among the high school students. The first bullet under the school outbreak does say that this is impacting students of all ages. So you can imagine that kids have siblings, and so one person gets it in one venue and then travels out and hangs around with another kid, but then that travels through, you know, another clique, and then that goes into the middle school, and then that travels into the Hopkins school. So this really is having far-reaching ramifications, I think, and we just have to remember that where this thing sort of started, its tentacles are moving out across the entire district, I think. So in terms of case count, in the town of Hopkinton, since December 1st, we have had 132 cases of COVID townwide. So that's not just for the schools, that's the entire community. Yesterday when I talked to Sean, he had shared with me that there are 19 cases of Omicron in the Commonwealth, but as of yesterday, none were detected in Hopkinton. And one of the things that he wanted to point about Omicron is that it's spreading a whole lot faster than the Delta variant, as you know. But the last one of these bullets is the one that I really want to spend some time on, and that's the one about responsible behaviors. So that last bullet says, please stay home if you are not well. And, oops, I think I can make that a lot bigger for you. There we go. All right, and here's why we're asking people to stay home if they are not well. We used to hear from Sean McAuliffe all the time that if the COVID virus didn't come into our schools, it would never be spread in our schools. And that makes great sense. And so we used to say to people that if you're not feeling well, if you feel like you've got the sniffles, a sore throat, a little bit of a headache, you're lethargic, stay home and take a rapid antigen test, call your primary care physician, get a PCR test, all of those things. And I think for a long time people were doing that. And I don't know if it's just pandemic fatigue, but people have seemed to sort of slow down on that behavior. And what we have been seeing is that we have people who are symptomatic now coming into the school. We have actually had people who have tested positive with a PCR test come into school. We've had people who have tested positive with rapid antigen tests go to extracurricular activities. And those things are really not okay. One of the things that happened today at the Elmwood School is we had a person test positive, and that person had 39 close contacts. So what that means with 39 close contacts is that those are children who are not going to be in school to get just regular old ordinary education. They're not there to get some of the services that we know they need. They won't be there for all of the activities that happen in the week before they go on break, and lots of that is fun. It's really too bad that kids are missing out, and we have to be really careful when we say, oh gosh, I did send my child to school, but it was just the sniffles. So I can't underscore enough how important it is to be really, really cautious at this time. That's what we need people to do. So if you take a look at where we are, oops, I thought this had been updated. I think that the high school is actually up to 15 now. And our total cases are absolutely rising. And as I said earlier, that 15 will definitely go up tomorrow. Because when we see 15 on the Hopkinton Public Schools dashboard, what that actually tells us is that 15 are validated and verified cases. So we do have positive PCRs that have gone back to public health. At this point in time, we absolutely know that there are people who have tested positive with rapid antigen tests, and you're not seeing those numbers up there. And those rapid antigen test kids may end up being kids who have had contact with others. And so, the fear now is that there can be that additional spread. So once again, if you are not feeling well, please stay home. If you've tested positive with a PCR or a rapid antigen, please stay home.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
You said in the previous slide that they had to do with external sports. Does that mean that the 10 are not spread within the school, that they are from sports being brought into the school? Is that what I'm hearing, or what's the?
That is primarily what we're seeing, that out of school social events, that athletics those are the kinds of places where the spread is actually taking place, yes.
Interesting, okay.
Out of district, you said too. It was out of districts,
No.
you said? Actually, I wrote it down.
Oh, did I?
Out of district sports activities, is that what you said? Like a
Oh.
basketball team that was out of town?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. If I
Oh.
said that, that's incorrect.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
Yeah.
say that.
Dr. Kavanaugh, have any athletic teams been suspended because of an outbreak at this point?
Yes, I believe that girls varsity basketball is not practicing or playing at this point in time.
So can I ask the 39 close contacts? Those
Yes.
kids are in school currently though, because they're test and stay or something of that nature? Those 39 close contacts?
That's right. So here's one thing that we have to remember is that if you are a close contact in school, so if you and I sit next to each other in the same second grade classroom and I'm COVID positive, you become a close contact, but that qualifies for test and stay. If, however, I am a person who is unwell and I go to aftercare, or if I go to basketball practice, or if I go to a trombone lesson with 3 other students, and that all happens outside of school, all of those children do in fact become close contacts, but they're not qualifying for test and stay.
So do they have to stay out of school if they don't qualify for test and stay?
They do indeed, yes. We had a meeting with the commissioner yesterday, and a lot of superintendents are pushing to be able to permit test and stay for close contacts that happen outside of school. And at this point in time, that's not something that DESE is able to entertain.
Is it my understanding that vaccinated individuals also don't get to test and stay?
That is correct. If you are vaccinated, you also don't get to test and stay.
And do
What-
vaccinated kids have to stay out of school if they're exposed out of school, or are vaccinated kids allowed to? At one point, I know that the CDC had said that vaccinated individuals did not need to quarantine if they had been exposed.
No, I
Is
think
that-
that you might be right, that if you're vaccinated and you have an out-of-school
Okay.
exposure, you do have to stay home because we don't know the nature of your exposure. Like, the belief is that if you are exposed in math class, I know exactly the nature of your exposure.
So it's regardless of vaccination status, you have to quarantine if you're exposed outside of school.
I believe that that is true.
I had a couple of questions. So the 39 cases at Elmwood, all those students are masked, right? Elmwood is still fully masked.
Elmwood is fully masked
Right,
except
and
for
those
lunch, yes.
39 close contacts among masked students, okay. And also, did you say that all the cases in the high school currently are Delta? They're confirmed to be Delta variant, not Omicron?
I can't say for sure that they are all confirmed because there are
Yeah.
some rapid antigens out there that would still need PCR testing. So we know that,
Of all
we know
the-
that there are more than the ones you see on that screen, but the ones that we know of now that
The
are
ones that we know
PCR
now.
are confirmed Delta.
Right, okay. Okay, right, like the basketball team.
And then one last question, because this struck me pretty hard when Sean said it on Tuesday, so I just want to verify my understanding. I heard Sean say that in previous Delta versions, if a person walked into a household and they had Delta and their household was vaccinated, it tended to not spread. And that in this version, they're finding that it's spreading to all the vaccinated individuals in a household. Is that the understanding that you've gotten from Sean as well?
It is. I think if we look at the second bullet under school outbreak, one of the things that he'll tell us is this is a fast-moving and highly contagious Delta variant, yes. So it does seem to be spreading where other times it might not have, yes.
Can I ask a question? Are we seeing any serious responses? I mean, are these kids getting very sick?
According to Sean, no. He said most of these people either have like very minor symptoms or even in some cases none at all.
Okay, so no one's been hospitalized?
No.
or- Thank you.
So currently, I know tomorrow things could change at the high school, but currently we have more positive cases in close contacts at Elmwood where we have masks than we do at the high school where masks are optional. Is that right?
No.
39
Not
at
any-
Elmwood?
Not anymore, it's
They're-
mostly at the high school.
Those are cool.
Yeah. If we look at cumulative cases.
No, just current.
Oh, right, no, current cases, the high school is.
Is how many?
11?
Well, it says 11 on that slide, but I think if you went to the dashboard right now, it would be up to 15.
So the high school is more than the other four schools combined.
Indeed, yes, yeah.
I thought we just said there are 39 at Elmwood.
Those are
That was
Close
cumulative.
contacts.
Yeah.
We don't know how many close contacts we have at the high school.
For
I see.
15 cases,
Okay.
that's probably
It's
a
just,
lot.
yeah, the
A lot.
confirmed cases are,
Okay.
Dr.
Two.
Kevin,
go ahead, sorry.
so do we know anything, did Mr. McAuliffe know anything about percentages of students who have had the booster shot, who have,
Well, we didn't talk about that.
I wonder if, I think.
If he's watching, he'll probably tell me in 2 seconds.
I'm just wondering if the Delta variant is spreading because it's been 8, 9, whatever months since the shots were initially concluded.
That's
Yeah,
an interesting question.
yes, it is.
And currently the booster shot is available to 15 and older?
It's 16 and 17-year-olds only, I think.
16 and older, Matt?
I guess I've lost track of what the public health objective is at this point, because you read so many things right now about what's happening, especially amongst vaccinated individuals, if there's very little rate of serious of illness or any symptoms at all. And then we're being told that eventually this virus is something we will all live with. So at what point will public health officials come around and advise us that, hey, we're living with this, and you're fully vaccinated community, and people aren't getting seriously ill. So I'm kind of waiting for that day. I haven't heard that happen yet.
Yes.
But I still feel like we're living under the rules of the pre-vaccine a year ago, where we counted infections and case counts, and we're not talking as much about the fact that amongst vaccinated population, there's very minimal disruptive impact to their health.
Yes, I would say you're not wrong about disruptive impact to their health, right? I mean, I think the kids who are contracting COVID are kids who are getting, a little malaise, some sniffles, that kind of thing. But Mr. McAuliffe wants off-ramping shut down at this point. And he gave me a call today at 4 o'clock to state that sort of unequivocally and very explicitly. What his recommendation would be, and mine as well, is that starting tomorrow, kids at the high school are back wearing masks, and they continue to do that through their return in January. And certainly the school committee can review the data at your first meeting in January. I'm sure that he would be happy to weigh in. But at this point in time, I think because this variant feels so contagious, and because the sort of onset, you start shedding the virus so immediately, that's advancing the spread of it. And given the fact that we are going into the holidays, it feels like even if it's not disrupting someone's physical health, it's certainly disrupting people's ability to enjoy the holiday and be social and all of those things. And if we're going into a 10-day vacation, I wouldn't want kids going into a 10-day vacation ill. So it would be my recommendation that we vote on that tonight, and I think that either way, public health is probably going to.
We also know that the number of cases in the hospitals is increasing, even though, and I know for Dr. Dixon at UMass, who's the head of all the UMass hospitals, which is the largest central Mass hospital, has said that what's different now than it was a year ago is that we no longer have the ability to set up field hospitals because they don't have the staffing anymore. That there has been a lot of people who have left healthcare, a nursing strike at another major hospital in the area, and they are reporting frequently at 110 or 120% of their capacity, as well as an increase in specific to COVID that seemed, and I don't have today's latest data, but it seemed like the numbers were almost doubling COVID case-wise in the hospital from 1 week to the next.
But again, our responsibility for the Hopkins schools is that 0 to 19 age group, where you see the highest number of cases, like 15 times as many cases as other age groups, but you see 10 to 15 times less the illness rate in the 0 to 19 age group.
I would also argue, though, that we're seeing now, if you're even just looking at kids that are, if they're being exposed out of school and they have to quarantine, there's also disruption to their education. And we have, with the number of cases that we have, if we have 15 today, and Dr. Kavanaugh is saying we're going to have a lot more tomorrow, if those kids have exposed 39 kids outside, if one of those kids exposed 39, another exposed 30, how many high schoolers will be out of school? We don't exist in a vacuum.
Yeah, which is where I was suggesting that it's time to relook at our policies on why close contacts or even people with symptoms or positive cases need to be out of school. At what time are we going to be acknowledging that we're living with this virus just like we live with the flu?
So when the public health officials come out and give us that authorization to have that conversation, I feel like I might be there then. It doesn't sound like we're able to have that conversation.
Do you want to? Are we going to move that
Yeah.
agenda topic to now? It might be a good time to have
Sure.
that agenda topic.
We could move that into, because we're not quite ready for.
I think that we have given the superintendent authority to reverse the school committee policy if she deems she needs to do so. I'm uncomfortable with the school committee voting to change the policy for a number of reasons. But probably first of those is that public health is not our expertise. You happen to work in public health, so you have some insights. As Meg works in education, so has insights there. But I feel that the situation that we've been put in by the state method of implementing this health policy is unfair to school committees. I frankly, I feel like our committee is doing the best that we can under these circumstances, and I thank this committee and everyone on it for the leadership we've expressed to our children and the general population. And I know we stand together regardless of how we might disagree before we vote. I do have pointed criticism for administrators and state public health agencies. I feel that it's a strange situation that school committees and Department of Education have become in the business of making health policy. And in my opinion, I feel that administrators and state public health agencies have conveniently avoided political risk by deferring their duties to school committees. I feel that school committees are not trained in public health, yet we're empowered to reverse state policies like the mask off-ramping for districts of 80% or above using subjective criteria. And that's the one area where the state has given us solid objective criteria to apply to a public health related decision, yet they've also given us the authority to overturn it on a whim, subjectively. I would like to not vote on it because of all those reasons. I guess I probably have a lot of criticism for the news media as well, but we can save that for another day. I do really admire the database that the Boston Globe has because it has great data there by age cohort and infection rate, as well as hospitalization rate and death rate by age, and I think that's very informative. I know when I gather for Christmas this year, my parents who are over 80 have said they would like to opt out, and they'll see us sometime in January. They'll be home. We can maybe see them in the backyard or something like that, but those are decisions each family can make. But given that this very strange and unfair, in my opinion, political situation that the state has put school committees in, I would like to push the ball back to the state, who, in granting us the waiver of the mask requirement, stated very unequivocally that at any time the state can reverse their waiver for Hopkinton if they see a health need to do so. And they haven't done so.
Others want to weigh in on both, I guess, where you fall on this in terms of whether or not you feel like this would be something that people want to move forward and take a vote on, or anything else related to this?
I feel perfectly comfortable voting on this. I feel that the Board of Health has given us guidance. I think when we originally did the trial, one of the things that I was looking at was spread among vaccinated individuals in the town. And I was looking really hard at that and going, okay, it looks okay. And we know a lot of off-campus gatherings are happening and the kids are not coming back sick. So it looks okay. But now, we're seeing something very different. We're seeing kids leaving the school, hanging out, and coming back in ill. In fact, up to 15, it's pretty bad. We're having the public health official in our town tell us this is virulent, this has spread very quickly, and it's spreading among vaccinated people, which once again was one of my metrics for is this okay or is this not? And I have to agree, like, kids going into the holidays, having to avoid seeing their grandparents or their elderly relatives or their immune compromised relatives because they caught COVID, in the last few weeks. And granted, I mean, it looks like it hasn't happened within the school, but I would not want the responsibility of having it happen in the school with this sort of current situation. So I would be fine voting for Sean's recommendation.
I believe it was the last meeting, or the one before that, where we authorized Dr. Kavanaugh to make the call if she saw fit, and I'm very comfortable doing that because week after week for the past 18 months, we've heard ourselves talk at length about public health. And it's opinion. And so I would just prefer Dr. Kavanaugh to make that call, because we've authorized her to, and now we can focus on the students and talk about something else.
I'm comfortable making a vote on this. I think, I agree with everything that Leah said. I understand the frustrations with direction that I wish we were getting from people who are more knowledgeable, but I also recognize that looking at just numbers and data, it doesn't always tell the full story, and there's a lot of nuance to understanding what is actually happening in a community. So when we voted, originally, one of my large concerns was that the students who had been vaccinated with 2 shots back in the spring were going to see reduced efficacy of those shots, which I don't have data on, but I am curious. It seems like this is the time that potentially we're now seeing spread among vaccinated folks, and like you, I know that these cases are being contracted outside of school, but it's easy to walk around asymptomatic or with reduced symptoms because you've been vaccinated. But now we're going to the holidays, people are traveling, there's a whole lot of movement in communities, many of whom are not as well vaccinated as Hopkinton. I, like Nancy, share a concern about disruption of learning, because even though at some point this is going to become like the flu or any other virus that we deal with, the reality is our country has not made it that yet, and we are bound by policies that are outside of our control that create a huge learning loss for a rapidly growing number of students when cases rise like this. So, because we are here in a position to represent the community, to do our best to interpret the situation that is in front of us for Hopkinton, and to protect learning, I would be comfortable voting, and I would vote in favor of the recommendation from the Board of Health and Dr. Kavanaugh to reverse the mask optional.
So,
Yeah, just one final attempt for us. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
so with regard to what Joe said, I do share some of your sentiments in terms of, I feel like back in August, we were put in a tough position where we were asked to be making decisions that really felt like they should have come from the state, ultimately did come from the state, but it's been, the guidance that has been put out has often fallen to us. When, like you said, we are not public health professionals, we're not MDs, we don't have the same level of experience as some others who could have made the decision. That said, I also feel like we did make this decision, and when we made this vote at the beginning of December to extend this through December, the caveat had been that it could be brought back to the school committee or by a decision of the superintendent. So I do feel like I would be not only comfortable, but I feel like it shows good support for our superintendent and our public health officials if we take a stand on this. So that's.
Okay. I mean,
Can
just,
I make a motion?
go ahead.
I was going to make a motion if you want to discuss something.
Yeah, I do want to discuss one more attempt because it looks like we're divided. So it's very difficult to continue to have this policy discussion so frequently. We're doing these 3-week trials. So in November, we had a vote at the end of October. We did a 3-week trial in November. But during that, we knew, boy, we're going to have the same conversation again in end of November, early December. And then we had it, and we had a 3-week trial. And we built in a caveat that the superintendent has the authority to change our policy if needed. And now here we are, even before the 3 weeks are over, having the discussion that we dread having at the beginning of January, which we're going to have this discussion again at the beginning of January. I just feel that we're creating a very unstable policy environment by voting a policy that's temporary, that gives the superintendent authority, and then before that temporary period is over, reconsidering it again. I would like to see us have the political fortitude to stand behind our decisions, especially when they already have an escape valve in terms of the authority we've granted the superintendent. I also want to remind people that we are not living in a COVID vacuum, that so much is happening because of the policies that we're putting in place as a school committee ourselves and that we have to adhere to. There's millions of dollars in impact to school districts like Hopkinton on the mental health side on the learning loss recovery side that are a direct result of some of these policies. And I think that it's important for the community to understand that when some of us vote against reverting the mask off-ramping policy, it's out of a consideration of that larger picture too. It's not that we don't care, it's that we care deeply.
So,
Thank you.
I would like to just jump on that. I also care very deeply about
Yeah.
mental health. I think we all do. I guess I come at it from a little bit of a different angle in that I am very concerned that at the rate that we're going, we could end up having to close classrooms again like we did at Elmwood. We could end up having to close things at the high school, if not go fully remote at some point, which I know DESE has come out and said, set a very high threshold to allow that, but we don't know how far this surge is going in the next little over a week. And I think that the mental health risk of closing a school and going fully remote is greater than having kids wear a mask for another 6 days, or 5 days, because there's no school next Friday. That would be mine.
I would like to add one more thing to that, which
Go
is
ahead.
I know at least one child who is currently scared to go to school, has been staying out of school because of what's happening. So that child's mental health is being severely impacted by the fear of going into the school. Secondly, I also think that it's unfair to offload onto our superintendent a decision that we find hard to make. She's not a health official either, and so
It's very easy for me to make.
she's our employee.
Yeah.
And so it feels like it's sort of unfair to offload the same responsibility we're saying we're having a difficult time because we're not health officials onto our employee who's also not a health official. So that is my concern with not voting on it as a school committee.
So-
Just for the record, I'd like to clarify, I'm not uncomfortable making a decision because it's hard. I'm fully confident in my decision to keep the mask off-ramping policy in effect. But my concern is with the uncertainty we're creating by continually revoting our own policies.
So
Thank you.
I would take that forward to when we bring this back up in January, that
Yeah.
maybe that is the point at which we discuss that this is not that we give the superintendent different authorization going forward, both to decide when masks come on and off.
And I just want to comment on that, because I think we are trailblazers in how we
Yeah.
are addressing
Yeah.
this. And we're not, these are anticipated checkpoints. This is not an unpredictable.
This one's not.
It is,
Yeah.
because when we voted it, we said we would keep a close eye on cases, the rising cases and transmission, and the superintendent would be authorized to, even if it's an emergency, make a call or to bring it back to us. I don't think there's anyone in the community that is surprised that we are having a conversation on this. I think this is how, it's not a policy like our other policies that we set as blanket and they're in place. This is specifically time-bound with caveats to revisit, and that's what we're doing. And I actually welcome the fact that we can have these conversations and be
Yeah.
part of this decision.
having it,
I
yeah.
know that they happen frequently and it's inconvenient, but the pandemic is like that. That is the nature of the pandemic. It is volatile, it is unpredictable. We don't know about the Omicron variant that hasn't really even hit our community yet. We are servants of the community, and this is something that we have to deal with.
Yeah, oh, I totally agree. For that matter, then, if we want to talk about the substance of the conversation, how do people feel about the fact that Elmwood is masked and has a lot of cases?
So there are fewer cases at Elmwood than there are at the high school. The high school has more cases than the other 4 schools combined by a fair margin.
But aren't
Pull
the
it.
vast majority of those traced back to a single athletic team event?
Well,
I don't think we can say that the cases that you're seeing are traced back to a single athletic team event. There is certainly one athletic team event, but we are learning that there are other things that have happened outside of school with different peer groups, different from the basketball team, and those are also contributing to those numbers.
we also know the science, though, that if kids are sitting unmasked together, there is a risk that's greater if the numbers are greater in the high school, that they're going to eat. So even if they can't trace a case back now that has been that way, the fact that there is much more COVID at the high school now than there was when we voted this a couple weeks ago increases the chances that somebody's going to be exposed in our schools.
Okay.
And I just want to add, I do appreciate the opportunity to have this public conversation, but I am uncertain why we offered this authorization to Dr. Kavanaugh, which she could call upon immediately. I understand
So-
we have a role to play here, but why did we even offer her that authorization? Wait, I'm not finished.
No, I wasn't going to go.
I just like to pause a little bit before my sentences and take a little gulp of air. You know, my concern too is, and I hear all of your fears, and the more you talk, the more frightened I become. And fear is a very seductive thing. And the more we talk about it, the more we spread it in the community too. And I don't hear us talking about the fact that we have such a high vaccination rate and that kids aren't getting seriously sick. I mean, should we just shut down the schools when people get the sniffles with the flu or the cold? I really believe we have to start thinking forward about what kind of real impact COVID is having on the community's health. Yes, they're getting positive PCR tests and rapid antigen tests, but are these kids being hospitalized? Are family members being hospitalized?
But they can't go back to school is the problem. It's the fact that the out of our control, our
Well,
protocols.
Maybe
and-
our protocol needs to change. Maybe that's
Well, I
something
don't think we
need
have the
to
authority to
consider.
do that. That's a.
We could write a letter to those in authority to do so, if we could ever get to that point in our conversation.
I
Don't think we'll get there.
I would be in favor of, at a future meeting, looking
Yeah.
in terms of what feedback we would like to give the state, because I
Right.
think regardless of where we fall on tonight's issue,
Yeah,
I think I've heard from everybody some degree of frustration with what we're getting from the state.
agreed. Something we can all agree
Yeah,
on.
some we can all agree, and to be fair, we've disagreed in different ways all the way through this, and yet we've come together after productive discussions.
I would like to just put out there, Nancy, related to that for the community, the fact that people might not know that when we disagree, we still stand very united.
Absolutely.
That I don't think people maybe know that it's not an exaggeration to say that we've had nearly 100 meetings together since I joined the board. It's not
I
an
know, that's why
exaggeration.
we're laughing.
Since I joined the board a year and a half ago as a volunteer.
Potentially
Nearly
surpassed.
100 meetings, and many of those had to do with this very topic or very closely related topics. So while you may hear disagreement or strong opinions, at the end of the day, we have been battle tested together like no other team. And no matter what we decide tonight or in January, we stand united. So I don't want anyone to think they have leverage against a divided board or anything like that. So I just want to clarify that. And I respect the disagreements we've had and the opinions we all have.
I agree
I
with
think
all
we've
that.
been a model for the state, other school committees in other ways than
Don't
just
go too far.
leadership. I know, I want to say, you read news stories about these vitriolic school committee meetings in other parts of the country. We haven't had that. We've had respectful discussion, and I really am grateful to the committee for that.
I am too, and I appreciate you highlighting that for our audience. That's
For
it.
all three watching.
Well, I anticipate there could be others at home watching. It feels like we all kind of have our position of where we are. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion at all?
I would like to make the motion.
Go right ahead.
I would like to get the motion right. I would like to move to off-ramp or reverse the mask optional policy starting tomorrow, Friday, December 17th, and continuing through the students' return in January, and actually beyond that to our first meeting. I think our first meeting is after the students' return. Is that not correct?
What's the date?
I would like to continue through our first meeting where we can reconvene and vote it again with the data
Date.
at hand.
So,
And so do we
Would I s-
revoke our
um,
emergency
so-
authorization?
No, I think the
The-
emergency, I understood, maybe I understood it wrong, but I understood it to be if on a Wednesday, Dr. Kavanaugh saw, 17 kids in a classroom had in-school spread that came forward, and we couldn't post a meeting and get together, if we couldn't do the mechanics of getting together, she could make the decision on her own. But if we were getting together, we could do it as a committee. That's how I understood the.
Well,
the-
that's an understanding, it
Yeah,
wasn't worded
that's,
that way.
I thought
it
that's
wasn't,
how
I
it was
made the, I
worded.
believe I made the you made the motion.
I don't
Yeah,
remember.
I think you made the motion, Meg, and I agree. But regardless, anyone's free to make a motion tonight, right? But I do agree with Meg that we have already given the superintendent authority to make this decision. That's all.
Okay, so.
Do you want me to say that
motion-
again?
Yes,
Okay.
is your,
Do
is
you
your
know the
motion
date of the
to-
meeting?
I did, I looked that up, it is January 6th.
Okay, my motion is to revoke the mask optional policy starting tomorrow, Friday, December 17th, continuing through the break and until we can meet again as a school committee on January
6th.
6th.
Can I offer a friendly amendment?
I would love a
suggestion
friendly
is
amendment.
It might be clearer to make the motion to reinstitute masking universally at the high school.
Good point. I would like to
Um,
make a motion to
until
reinstitute
till-
the mask mandate.
That, yes.
Is that better? Until we reconvene in January as a school committee and can vote again.
I second that.
So a motion by Amanda and a second by Leah. All those in, go
Question,
ahead.
discussion. Would you still be making that motion if tomorrow, it's unlikely, but if Dr. Kavanaugh comes in tomorrow and there's no further close contacts or cases?
I would make that
Yeah.
motion now just because of the number of cases. Today, I'm pretty clear there are going to be more, but even
Yeah.
if there are no more, 15 times, 2 or 3 friends or 5 friends per person. Because of the learning disruption, because they can't go to school. I would personally make that motion still.
Thank you.
So, all those in, so we have a motion by Amanda, a second by Leah. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
No.
So we have 3 in favor and 2 opposed. It carries, and masking will be reinstituted at the high school tomorrow. Thank you guys for a spirited discussion.
Thank you.
Look forward to January.
Yeah.
So that, go ahead. You have more in your
Yeah,
report?
Elaine Lazarus.
Is
The
that, I
motion was
don't,
sent to you.
okay, I don't think I ever received that.
So I'll just jump in here for a moment. The Board of Health, through the Director, Sean McAuliffe, has also asked you if you would vote to support the international travel letter that went to families today. I know that the Board of Health wants that people will follow those CDC guidelines if they are traveling internationally. And I know that it's not on your agenda, but in conversations with the town manager, because of the fact that the Omicron variant is primarily coming into Massachusetts right now through international travel, they have asked if this board would endorse that.
Again,
Is this the cancellation letter? Sorry,
No,
I'm just
which
trying
letter?
to
This is-
understand
sorry.
what we're talking about.
This is,
Is there any way to put it up there?
the
sure, it went
superintendent
out yesterday
circulated it, yeah.
from Sean McAuliffe and me.
Yeah.
And it, if I can find it, it'll just take me a second. And what they would like for you to do is to just endorse the CDC guidelines for international travel. If you give me a moment, I can
Okay.
pull it up. And if you don't have the motion from Elaine Lazarus,
do not.
What
I
is-
can
what
send
is-
that
So I
Where is
to
this
saw the
related?
letter, it was a letter that the superintendent circulated, I think it was a draft, and it talked about, it was to go to families, reminding them if you're traveling, to comply with vaccination and testing requirements on departure and return. And I have, again, I have a problem with this, like, it's already a CDC recommendation to families. And so we're asking a school committee to endorse a federal CDC guidance that's already out there that airlines are also going to remind families, travelers of. And I just feel that when we participate in these kind of ridiculous political situations that school committees are put into, we're perpetuating the problem. I think that airlines will advise families of these testing, and the CDC advises them. And I don't feel in a position to endorse a CDC policy.
I think the concern on the part of the community is that when people are traveling internationally, if you bring the Omicron variant back, and people come into our public schools, we'll start to see spread in public schools. So
Sure
that's
you
the
will.
role of the school in this.
Yeah, oh, understood, yeah.
This did go out to the community, it's not a draft, because
It
the
did,
police
yeah.
also shared it. It was
Oh, well, then
signed
it's
by
out,
both
so we
Dr.
don't need to
Kavanaugh
vote.
and the
And
chief
Sean
of
McCall.
police.
No.
Okay, so I'm looking at, the police shared it and signed it.
And I am not online right now, so.
I mean, I'll say,
Yeah.
I hope that people who travel comply with the requirements, but I don't like the school committee getting into this kind of thing.
So,
We're not telling
Okay.
people whether or not to meet their grandparents, for example. So it's-
so, I actually, I take a different position on
Sure.
that, in that I think that it is a good show of kind of solidarity among, it's backing our superintendent and our public health official in requesting that people, saying that we support that letter. I don't think it's political so much as trying to keep people from bringing more back to our schools, so that hopefully we'll be able to be back in the position in early January that we were in a few weeks ago. I did not receive that.
I'm, you know, with Susan, I'm gonna share it with you, do you think you can pull it up? Are you online right now?
You know,
I apologize, this email came in during the day today, but I have to read the letter before I can take a vote.
This
That's
is
okay.
the joint HPS DPH intent to travel letter.
Yes,
Okay.
that is the one that, am I correct?
Okay, I
that
did
Elena
read
is
it
asking?
earlier, I just was,
Yes,
I
that's
saw a
fine.
bunch of letters today.
Yes,
so
there was a,
I was confused.
Lands in your inbox.
And you're just asking for our endorsement or support?
it's an
I'd
open
have to
sent.
look to see exactly what Elaine
Yeah, that would be
Lazarus's
helpful.
recommendation says for approval.
Does I'm not reading specific criteria that we're putting on return to school. Are there additional layers of
How will you
testing or something about returning to school, or is it just the
enforce it?
standard guidelines for travel?
I did not see in the letter.
You know,
I think it's just the.
Yeah, for whatever reason, we're really having trouble with internet in this
see
setting.
any-
It's reciting law.
It doesn't,
I didn't see
CDC
any
guidance.
motion anywhere, is what I'm confused by. Like, I saw the letter and I was like, oh yeah, this is a good letter.
I see it as harmless. I see it as superfluous, but harmless.
Mhm.
But I also don't like school committees being drawn into these kind of things when the administrative leadership team already has the authority to do it and has actually already done it.
All right, so Nancy,
do you want to come back to this?
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll
And
go back
just-
online at some point.
So then, let me pull back up where we are.
The chair report?
Okay, so, yes, so in terms of the school committee chair report, I have approved warrant 22-023, which is included in the folder. I did receive a fair amount of email between last week and this week. I received a number of emails that were copied, few that were copied on everybody, with people requesting that we return to full masking. I did receive one that I think you were also all copied on today, that requested that we not go back to masking and that we consider unmasking our lower grades as well. And I, received a few that were sent to me that were very similar in nature that I did not clog all your inboxes with, so. Very similar, and then there was an email as well on the intent, not the intent, the discussion of the international trips, which is gonna happen later in the agenda tonight. So that would bring us to liaison reports. Do people have liaison reports that they would like to share? There was, I don't know, do you wanna share that as part of the MSBC piece?
Oh,
Oh,
that's a big one.
That's a big one.
It surely is, yes. So yesterday, the MSBA invited Hopkinton, the Elmwood School Project, into their period of feasibility. we're leaving eligibility and going to feasibility. Yeah, that's very exciting. So I think
So
that the start date for that
So
is January.
amazing.
Yeah, so we're
A
moving
long
right
time
along.
coming.
Oh my
It sure
gosh.
is, yeah. So that's something to celebrate.
Excellent. Does that mean one of the first steps is to start interviewing to get a project manager on board for the project? Is that one of the
Yeah.
first steps the MSBA works with us on?
So the
Okay.
first thing that we'll do is follow the template the MSBA has put together for the request for service, the RFS for the OPM. So I'll be working on putting that together. Once we put in, using their template, put in the Hopkinton information, we send it back to the MSBA for review and approval, and then we can hit the streets.
Okay.
Okay, that's exciting. Anything else on liaison reports before we move on? I would like to move out of order Dr. Zaleski, who's been waiting very
Oh.
patiently, to bring her up, and then we can go for the out-of-district expenditure report. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much for having me. Nice to see you as well. Thank you for moving me up. There we go. There we go. I have internet,
That
right.
side of the room has better internet than
I
this
think it
side.
probably does.
Because the computer with Jesse also seems to be doing well.
You can wave to Jesse again.
Hi, Jesse. So thank you for having me. I put together some slides tonight, and this is a follow-up conversation to the conversation during my budget around the out-of-district, and providing some better clarity in terms of enrollment and the expenditures. And so this first slide is our enrollment. And what I did was I put together from FY15 till now, the number of students that we've had in the district and out of the district. And the reason I put this slide up is I want you to see, when you look at the totals, that we've fluctuated and we've grown, but quite frankly, the fluctuation is not enough of an impact to hit the budget in terms of enrollment. So what I mean by that is, I'm going to show you in the next couple of slides that it's really not about the enrollment. We've got heavy enrollment here in Hopkinton, as you know, but the profiles of the students is what matters. And so that's why I really wanted you to see the numbers, because when we think enrollment and we look at the overall enrollment, we realize that it's bursting at the seams. But in special education, it gives and takes. And students come in, students move out, students go in placements, they're out of placements. So I just want you to see that it's pretty level over time. And I don't know if you
Karen,
can
do you
make this
think,
Can you
if you click
enlarge it?
under view, try clicking present under view and see if you can get full screen.
bigger.
There you go.
That's
That was
better.
it.
Yeah,
Ah.
that's better.
Technology is not my
Looks like I
strength.
just put on my reading
So
glasses.
thank you. So if you want to just take a moment and look at that, in FY15, when I first came to district, 494, and here we are in FY22, and it's really 501. It's not that great of a difference. So in knowing that, looking at this expenditure bar graph, I want to show you, because again, it's not about the number of students, but more so about the profiles. As you can see, there's a fluctuation in the expenses. And I put in orange here, this is the amount that's offset by circuit breaker. So in our budget, they're primarily, we had an opportunity last year to use some grant funds to offset some of the out-of-district, but typically, I build the budget and then I work with Ms. Rothermick and Dr. Kavanaugh to offset with the circuit breaker. So that's how we're using our funds in the district, but this is how it's fluctuating.
And just to remind you, this is not all special education expenditures, it's just the out-of-district expenditures.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so this is just specific to out-of-district. So you can see, even though we've had, pretty level enrollment, if you will, and, slight increases here and there, but the expenses have gone up and down over time. And in 2018-19, expenses, creeped up. But again, if you look at enrollment, if I were to go back to that slide, in FY18, it was, hovering around 483, which is not, not much different than where we're at
And
right
the
now.
out-of-district is at 28.
Correct. Correct, yep.
So
20.
Dr. Zaleski, on the bar chart, which side is 2021? I can't read the years.
Oh, I'm sorry, so to the far right.
Okay, so
So
that's
right here,
current.
yep, this is
Yeah.
2020, 2021.
Thank you.
Could you email that to us? Because I can't really see it.
Oh, sure, I can
Thank you.
certainly do that.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
I can-
actually going to be a
Karen,
concern
can you
of
just
mine
read what the
outside of
left-hand
Dr.
numbers are?
Zaleski. None of the financials seem to be in the the folder, so I didn't see Susan's, I haven't seen this, so, if we could get all the financial stuff that we're gonna look at today sent to us, that would be great.
Sure.
So Karen, on the left-hand side,
Yep.
can you just tell the dollar amounts that are going up there? Because they're very small.
Oh, sure. So, starting from the bottom, so there's 500,000, going up to 100,000. 150 is this mid-range right here, 200,000, and 250.
Okay.
Okay, so if you, so,
Yeah, those are millions, not thousands.
right, sorry,
Yeah.
right, 150 million. Sorry,
So can you say the numbers again, then they're millions? What do you mean? 2.5 million?
So 500,000, then 1
100.
million.
Yep, then 1 million,
1.5.
1.5.
2 million.
2 million, sorry,
And
yep.
2.5
million.
million.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Out of district expenditure.
Out of district expenditures, right. And again, the orange represents the circuit breaker.
And not in here is what you're predicting for next year, or is that the one on the far right? The one on the far right is in the past year?
No, so, right,
Yeah.
correct, right, so because we go by Sims data, and so our end of the year report is in June, so we get we do 2 reporting periods, which is October and June. So this is reflective of that period.
But I think we know from one of your earlier presentations, it's gonna go up significantly
Yes.
for next year.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So I want to show you what's happening, so you have an understanding of what's going on with the tuitions. So I did this in 2 years, because it really has climbed in 2 years, over the 2-year time. When I looked over the 5-year time period, but within the last 2 years, a few things are happening. So, this column here is the individual tuitions. So again, you have 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. And then I labeled at the bottom row here our private school placements, and I labeled them A through J, just to further protect student confidentiality in terms of who's going where. And again, these are private, not collaborative placements. So just to educate folks, we have 2 types of placements. We have collaborative, which is public day placement, and then you have private placements, that's what this is, and that's where the most of our budget impact is happening, is in the privates. So placement A has gone up by 113.8%. And I can tell you this placement used to be 180 days, and you'd have options for whether or not you were going to pay for ESY, depending on whether or not a family is sending a student to ESY. Well, this placement's not doing that anymore. So because this placement's not doing this anymore, and this placement also is a residential option, this goes right to 365. And so obviously there's a budget impact for the district, and there's an increase for the district. This is also reflective of student needs. So you may have a student in a placement, and you'll pay the tuition, and you'll pay the rate, whether it's depending on the number of the days as to how the programs are setting it up. But then the student may need additional support, like a one-to-one support, or one-to-one if they go into extracurriculars in this placement. So, or related service, OT, PT, or speech in the placement. So if there is additional support above and beyond what the programs are offering, we have to absorb that cost. So, but it's all packaged together. So when I'm negotiating the contracts, we look at the student profile, we look at the IEP needs, I'm looking what the program's offering, and then if I have to supplement within the program, them hiring additional staff, that's part of what's happening here. We only have 2 programs right now that we're working with that are 180 days. They're doing it the old school way, where we can negotiate with the families if they want the ESY, or if they're gonna opt to have it on the IEP. Most of them have it on the IEP, but some people opt not to go. So 2 placements are allowing us to do that. The rest of the placements are fluctuating anywhere between 205 days and 365, depending on the type of placement. So that is definitely part of the increase. Not to mention OSD pricing. So that's the Operational Service Division of the Department of Education. And that division sets pricing. And so just so you know, private programs can't just increase tuitions on us. They have to go through a very ethical process, and it has to be supported by the Department of Education. And so we have like an OSD pricing guide, and these placements will inform us that, pricing's going up, please prepare for your, FY 23 or 22 budgets. So we go by that guide as well, and that's how we're forecasting what's happening. But I just wanted to show you over 2 years' time how much these tuitions have increased. It really is some of these programs are pretty drastic. If you look at again, program A, program E, all of the programs have gone up significantly. These programs on here have been relatively stable. But again, it's dependent on profile, and it's dependent on student need, as well as the tuition factors. And some of these tuitions are above and beyond the 3%, so we always budget, about 3% as a prediction. But again, we've gotten emails saying that this is what we're changing, and part of it's to staffing too. So staffing needs have gone up, and how many students they're taking into the programs is part of that. So, and we look at cohorts as well, which definitely has an impact on where students are being placed and how they're funding it and staffing it. And cohort is a big factor. So just so you know what I mean with cohort is, one of the questions you may have is, why are the students in these placements and why aren't they staying here in the district, right? And we always promote least restrictive in special education. So least restrictive environment is definitely a DESE mandate. And it's good for kids to put them in the least restrictive, impactful environment. However, if a student is not faring well here in Hopkinton, and we don't have the ability to support them here, to keep them safe, or to allow them access to the curriculum, or to make effective progress within the curriculum, we would then look to the next restrictive environment. And we would either look to public day or a private day placement, unless you have programs in-house. So if I can take a minute just to talk about that, because I think this is so important to this discussion. So some of the profiles of these students are incredibly complex. And I'll just give you an example, not specific to any students, but we may have students with autism who have a dual diagnosis profile, which we talked about last time I was here. So autism with some social emotional needs and behavioral needs. Well, that's a highly specialized student that needs highly specialized supports. So we have sub-separate programs here in our district. We do. We have a sub-separate program where students can be substantially separate and receive, support. Substantially separate is above 60% of your day is spent outside of the classroom. And they're getting related services, OT, PT, speech, on top of their education. But when you're highly specialized like that and you need even more support, and let's say you don't have a cohort of students that have that same level of support and need, then what happens is we're faced with the decision, do you put them in the sub-separate environment where the cohort doesn't really match? Or do you place them out where they're going to be able to have peer interactions and they're going to be able to thrive? And that is the dilemma. So if we built programs, and I'll just use autism as the example, we had autism programs, if I were building autism programs, two things would happen. First, I'd have to have a cohort of kids, and I would never build programs if I know there's only one or two kids. It's not fair to the kids when they can get a rich program outside of this district with a cohort of students to help their social emotional growth. Second dilemma is, once you build a program, so let's say I did build a program and there was 2 or 3 students and it worked at one level. Well, you can't not have it at the other levels. Because what will happen is, you've now agreed to do this, and the IEP would call for it, and if you don't have it at every single level, then you're going to put the kids out at the next level. Mm-hmm. And the dilemma in Hopkinton is because we transition. We're every 2 years. If we were a I know this is a sore spot, if we were K6, we had K6 buildings or K5 buildings, then you could do it because you could build the programs, have the cohort of students. And the beauty of that, because I've worked in other districts where we've had this, is you can give the students inclusive opportunities while they're in these programs to still go to maybe art, to start transitioning back out of these type of programs to get support so they can be successful with that ease of transition. But here, because it's every 2 years, unless you have the cohort of students and unless you're building it through the whole district, it's just not going to be effective for the students. It's not best for them. So that's the dilemma that we're faced with here with some of these complex profile students. And the reason I chose to show you this private placement slide and not the day collaborators is because the private placement students are our most complex students. And it's having the biggest budget impact for us. I'm happy to answer any questions or give a deeper, explanation.
Thank you so much for bringing this information to us. I think it's really helpful for us to have this conversation too, because I know that nationally now there's a movement for further inclusion and inclusive opportunities.
Absolutely.
The goal, 90% of kids should be integrated into the community.
Yep.
I think in Hopkinton now it's 60%. And I would say that, farming kids out, whether it's good for them or great for them, you are putting them with cohorts who are not neurotypical, who are cohorts, you're saying that in terms of the same diagnosis, but that's not really providing them with a variety of experience that research tells us they can most benefit from being around neurotypical peers. So I just hope that we can have this conversation going forward, because I know that some kids need great care and I'm all for it. But I think, I worry about this continued segregation. Sending kids into an environment which is even more profoundly segregated, because separated is not equal. It's not allowing them access to the many opportunities the public school provides. So these kids who go into these cohorted environments don't have access to joining orchestra. They can't participate in sports. They can't do the many things that really make childhood and young adulthood so fun. So I just hope as we move forward, we can think carefully. At the same time, I'm truly grateful for all you do, and I think you care
Oh, thank you, no.
Immensely.
Thank you for saying that. And so just to clarify too, as you know, it's a team decision, right? It's not my decision alone, and I don't make those decisions alone. Oftentimes, if families are dissatisfied, let's say, with a team decision, they call me. I can't overturn a team decision outside of the team process, short of a legal settlement type of agreement. But so it's a team decision, and when these students are before us, they come to the team meeting with many providers often. Sometimes their social workers will show up, sometimes clinicians will show up. We've even had physicians on the phone, conference calling in with us, advising us. And then the families obviously have input, and they come to the table with all their data and their concerns. So we don't make the decisions lightly, and I know that you know that. But we also are very thoughtful in terms of how long students are staying out and when we're going to bring them back. So over the past 5 years, I looked at the data today, we've returned 7 students. I just returned a student to district last week. So we are very thoughtful about that. And because to your point, Dr. Tyler, we want students to have access to their home community. And when you look at what we're doing as a district, and I'll use the 18 to 22 program as an example, we believe in students building those home community partnerships, making connections, and being, adult lifelong learners here in their community and beyond. That is our goal. We don't want them separate. The other thing I want to clarify is when students are out of district, they are still our students. And they do have an opportunity, if they're able to participate in extracurricular here. So we have had some situations where students in out of district have asked us, can I join the basketball team? And we've actually even accommodated that, back when we had better transportation available to us, where we'd work with transportation companies to pick the students up at a particular time at their program, to get them back to district, to be able to join it, and we might have to provide one-to-one support. So they do have that opportunity when they're in an out-of-district placement, if they wanted to join an extracurricular and be part of what's going on here, as long as it's safe, as long as everybody agrees that it's okay. We check with the program, we check with the parent. So I want to be clear about that, because I say to families all the time, they're still ours. They're still ours. I introduce them to, Connie Shagnon, our district coordinator, who operates as the team chair for these students. I say, this is your direct connection to the district. We're here, we'll help you. We'll send our providers out to do assessments if we need to. So they're not just gone. And I know it can feel like that, especially if parents don't understand, or the community doesn't understand. And we do care deeply, and we want our students here. And like I said, our goal is always to bring them back into the least restrictive environment. But it has to be safe, and it has to make sense, and it's a team decision.
So I want to thank you for this information. This is great. And I also want to thank you for your thoughtful conversation about the K-6 stuff. I know we're going to be looking at our school setup, and we're going to be doing our what is it called? We're going to be doing
Campus planning.
Yeah. And I came to the district late, so my kids actually grew through a K through 8 school, of all things. And you're right. The cost is less, but there's also the fact that the special education coordinator knew my child from the point they were kindergarten to the point they were in 5th grade. And if they saw acting up in 5th grade, they knew it was still better than the acting up they did in kindergarten, and had that perspective of the change in the child,
Right?
which I do think must be hard when you have a 2-year transition.
It is, right. It's very
So-
tricky.
So I appreciate that being brought up as something, because it'll definitely be on top of mind as we have further discussion about the
Sure.
district.
Sure.
Ask a question,
Sure.
kind of piggybacking on what Leah was talking about in terms of our building. In looking kind of towards the future and the ability, if there were going to be different programs introduced in-house to allow kids, like you said, to be able to have a program here, is that something that currently space is limiting that we should be looking at in a new building and in our campus planning in general?
Yes. Yes. 100% yes. Space is definitely an impacting factor, a barrier, if you will.
Yep.
At this point, space is definitely a dilemma. And I think if we're going to look to the trajectory of what we were going to build and program development, and obviously the configuration of how you plan to set the schools up, but you need the adequate space, and then you've got to financially plan for the staffing. Because, again, the staffing for students who need highly specialized support has to be different than what we're offering during the school day, because that's why it's highly specialized. It can be done. Believe me, this stuff excites me. I would love nothing more than to have programs, K-12, for students with complex disabilities that we could service in-house and give them more inclusive opportunities to learn. But we have to be strategic about it, thoughtful about it, around the space and around the staffing and the funding of it. Because you can't do it at one level and not have it at the other levels, because that really is detrimental to families and to the students.
That makes sense to me just in looking at how our district is, but I wonder if we're at a point where we have an opportunity for future planning, just as a group and with our ESBC and
Yeah.
campus planning process.
Interesting, yeah. I have a question to follow up on something Meg said, and I'm not sure if I'm going to ask Meg to clarify or the director, but I also would just intuitively lean towards inclusion, right? And you mentioned, is it some kind of guidance from some authority that said 90%, or is it a report? And do we, as a school committee, do we have a policy on what threshold or target we're looking for inclusion?
That would be great if we had
But the
such a
first question is,
policy.
is it the 90% a fixed thing, or?
No. It's amongst inclusive educators who think that ideally we should have 90% inclusion because behavior problems are the result of poor planning, not the result of the children who have the complex profiles. But, we're talking about a huge psychological climate that needs changing, but perhaps before that happens, because I'm not sure how willing parents are to embrace kids who are different. I think they feel comfortable with this segregation. And this is de facto segregation. It's sending the kids into environments where they're not around all their peers and all of their variety.
Can I ask, because you shared it at the last time you came, what is the number of out-of-district kids we have?
As of this report, I'm going to clarify that twofold. This report's based on Sims data, so this
Yep.
data that you're looking at is 23 students out of district.
Okay.
As of today, we have 28 students.
So
28 students as of today.
what, just to help me understand, what is the 90% of? Because 23 is not 90%, not 60% of
90%
kids.
of kids who are on IEP should be fully included in the classroom, whatever percentage the school has. It's like 80% is full inclusion here.
So you don't just mean the out-of-district, you mean what we're also doing within the district? Is that,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That,
It just requires a
numbers
lot
person.
of planning and thought on the part of the community and a willingness to acknowledge that segregating kids, even with complex disabilities, is very similar to segregating children because of their color or their background. And those kids have just as much a right to be in that public school classroom and have opportunities, all of the same opportunities that the other kids have.
Yeah, I think I just want to clarify something because philosophically, and I think according to DESE, people would absolutely favor the least restrictive environment and would want kids in their local schools and all of that. But I think not everyone philosophically adheres to that. There are some parents who would like for their kids to have an out-of-district experience as well. So I just want to make sure that we understand that Hopkinton's not doing something untoward, what we're doing is really within the confines of the law and within, as Dr. Zaleski said, the team decision. When people get to the table, there are lots of people who are kind of weighing in on the appropriate educational placement for kids.
And are all of these out-of-district placements the result of team decisions or some the result of lawsuits against the district?
So it's not lawsuits, it's settlement agreements. We
Settlement
do have some
agreements?
settlement agreements, which I didn't certainly prepare that data for tonight's presentation, but the majority are team decisions. Every IEP, every placement decision, has to happen at a team. And if there's disagreement at the team around the placement, so for instance, if I recommended the student stay in Hopkinton Public Schools and, access our educators and our related service providers, and a family really said, you know what, I disagree with you, Dr. Zaleski, I feel like my child would get a better experience. Well, they certainly can work that through with us and reconvene the team, and we can ask for more data and overturn that decision of the initial team, or they can certainly get an attorney, and they can do a settlement. There's lots of processes. They can go through mediation through the Bureau of Special Ed Appeals, which I always offer to families as a first option because it's cost effective. It doesn't cost anything for the district and doesn't cost anything for the families, so that they don't have to incur attorney fees. But sometimes families don't want to do that, and sometimes families are very worried and they don't want to wait for the process, and they'll actually unilaterally place a student in a program and then contact us with their legal counsel and say, I would like to, really negotiate something with you because I already put my child here, and can we talk about that? But again, for the majority of these placements, they have to happen at the team process, and we are making team decisions. And like I said, I didn't prepare all the data for settlement agreements, but I can say, off the top of my head, I do believe more than half are definitely team decisions, with multiple providers, as Dr. Kavanaugh said, coming to the table, recommending it, whether it's physicians, or sometimes it's not them always coming to the table. They may bring reports from Boston Children's and other providers to give their expert input on what the student needs.
So just for the purposes of the budget, I think you had some very interesting budget numbers that were driven. What this is telling us is that a large percentage of the increase is due to tuitions going up. And I think on the previous bar chart slide, I just want to go back there for a second. I still don't fully understand how the circuit breaker works, but would it be fair to say that where there's a very small orange, I can't see the number.
125 is right here.
That's fine. That would indicate that in the previous year, there was a lower number of students.
Mm-hmm.
It's the lag. So we would anticipate maybe in the year that comes after the one on the right, which I think is probably this year.
Yes.
Whatever the orange is reflects this year's experience.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
It's
And
helpful.
if I could just, if you wouldn't mind going back to the first slide, Dr. Zaleski. So if you look over on the left-hand side and you're looking at FY22, you can see that we had in October 23 students who are out of district, and then Dr. Zaleski just told us that if we looked at that number today, so since October, it would be 28. So when we think also about the increase in budget, we have to remember that there are 5 additional students who are out of district. And if you look at the bar graph, you get a sense of what those costs look like.
And in order for us to make any structural changes that we were talking about, space is clearly an issue, so the lead time is long, culture shift. We're talking maybe 5, 6, 7 years out. But based on your vantage point today, if you look, even say K to 5 to start, do you see among the cases natural cohorts that could exist with the population that we have? Do we have cohort size populations that you see? I'm not asking you which ones, but just do you see that?
I definitely see an uptick in some trends. I will
Okay.
say that. And I think with our growing population and the type of students that we're having move into district in terms of their profile needs, there could definitely be a call for that.
Okay.
As of today, no.
But that aligns with the planning horizon, actually.
Yes, and it does. And let's think of, back to the pre-K discussion. When we looked at the pre-K students and the number of special education pre-K students coming in, well, there's your predictor.
Yeah.
There's your predictor for what's happening.
Okay. Thank you. It's very helpful, as Leah was saying, it's very helpful as we go into facilities planning and thinking about what we do with our physical spaces.
Sure.
Yeah, that would actually, adding just one request at some point, it would actually be really nice to get an understanding of what spaces would be ideal for, let's say, like she was saying, maybe a K-5, like what kind of special education spaces would be ideal for a school district to have in order to have the best special education type experience for the children?
Mhm.
So that then we can understand when we're looking at spaces like building layouts and things like that, we can have in our minds, okay, is there enough space to accommodate this thing that we're saying is really important to us, et cetera.
And I think, thank you, that's a really good point. And, I was part of the MSBA process when
Mhm.
Marathon was built,
Right.
and we do
That
that.
is a
We look,
step.
right, we look at the configuration, and we look at what makes sense in terms of, where we're placing the students, and then access to the service delivery. And that's really important. And we look at all aspects, the bathroom spaces, and the equipment spaces, and the related service provider offices and spaces. And certainly that would all be part of that process, and I definitely will be part of that process, as I was called upon before to do so, just to give the input, and with your input. I mean, I think this is an exciting opportunity for Hopkinton to make some real structural and systematic changes.
Are there any, we have members of appropriations here as well who may have budget-related questions from this presentation? Do you have any?
Yes, I do. I'm sure I'm a little behind, trying to pick all this up, and I know a lot of the discussion here is about integration and inclusion, but I'm trying to look at it just from a budget perspective. And, it's really the outliers where you have these extremely high costs for individual students, and I know, Dr. Zaleski, you're referring to, the teams and how you have the Boston Children's Hospital and a lot of representatives from the families trying to negotiate the solution, but is there any way that we have a threshold to say, well, this isn't the best program, but here's one that's almost as good, but it's half the cost or something? Do we have any leverage or anything that we can do? This, I'm strict, maybe I'm really behind, it's been discussed for years, but is there anything that we can do in terms of the teams that give us a little more, just on a little more cost containment?
Right, so,
It's kind of, I don't know if you can answer it here, or maybe I'm behind, but.
no, I can give you the simple yet complex answer, if that makes sense. So during the team process, and again, this goes with the thinking of least restrictive, which does promote inclusive practice, there's different layers that you can speak about. So certainly you'd look to in-district in terms of what you can offer in-district, and even in-district there's layers. So in-district we have inclusion, we have partial inclusion, we have substantially separate, we have related service only. Those are all the layers we talk about which promote inclusive opportunities to learn. When it gets to a place in the team meeting where multiple providers, maybe the team included, and parents say, it's not meeting my child's need, and we have data, our data, their data, outside provider data, then we look to the next step. So we go outside of all of those avenues, which then is the collaborative day placement avenue, which is a little bit more least restrictive than a private day placement. It's more cost effective. But collaborative placements don't always have what the students need. And so what we offer the families the opportunities to do, oftentimes, unless we already know the student needs a private placement or the family really is very passionate about a particular private placement, is we offer the families the opportunity, if we all agree the student needs a different placement, let's say a small therapeutic placement, then we offer them the opportunity to tour the programs. And we will lay the programs out that make sense for the student based on the profile, and the parents can go out and look, and some are more cost effective than others. But the truth be told, when we're at these meetings, we're not talking about, well, this is more cost effective, this is not more cost effective, because it's not about that at the team meeting. At the team meeting, it's individualized educational program for students. And although cost is always on the mind of, a director in terms of what how we're going to fund this, but the priority has got to be the student, because we're here to serve students, right? So we serve students, not money, but money definitely is a factor. And this is where the collaborative discussion comes into play. And we'll make agreements with families. And so sometimes we do need to go to mediation to make those agreements. Like, do you want to, pay for 50% of the tuition, or do you want to, so if we get into those type of negotiations, we will have collaborative discussion and cost-effective discussions around what we're doing in terms of placement. And I think the dilemma here, and just to catch you up, I don't remember if you were at the last meeting, but when we're dealing with the mental health side of things, and we've talked about this at length last time, and we're up against no beds in hospitals, these kids aren't going to fare well in a collaborative type of placement, and that's just a reality. And that's why, again, I'm showing you this private placement slide tonight, because these are where these students are going, along with those other multiple complex students we talked about. So there is many, many avenues and many, many layers to this. And to Dr. Kavanaugh's point as well, and I sit at these team meetings, I mean, the families, although inclusive practice is ultimately in their heart what they want, but their children can't access it right now. And they will tell us at team meetings, Dr. Zaleski, we believe in this. We know, we understand, we want nothing more than our child to come and graduate from Hopkinton High. But right now, my child is not doing well. And we need them to be in a placement. And so for that reason, it's a very respectful process, and it's a very well set up process through the Department of Education for families to have those conversations with us. So it doesn't feel like a segregation, Megan. I take that word to heart because we never want to put students in a position, particularly students with disabilities, to feel marginalized or segregated. And so that the process is a mutually collaborative process with families, and we value their input.
And when we're talking about the cost rise, so if we're looking at A, let's say,
Yep.
right? That is one student, and that student may have been in that placement for a few years, right? So moving them due to cost would actually possibly hurt the student at that point, because they've made peers,
Yes,
they have friendships,
right.
they've settled. So that would also factor into the decision, I assume, when you're looking at these costs about whether or not you could reduce it.
Well, right, so when we talk about that, when we think of private collaborative placement, a step down, private placement, a step down to that can be a collaborative. Or it could be a direct return. It could be if they're ready. So the flip side to that is, you're right, if they're doing great and making great gains, and parents want to keep them there, we keep them there, if it makes sense. But if a student is ready to start returning, but maybe not come right back to the district, the step down would be collaborative. And we do a really good job of this. I mean, Connie Shagnon, our out-of-district coordinator, is fantastic. She's been doing this for years. She's a licensed psychologist, licensed mental health clinician, and she is skilled at this. And she's also our Elmwood School psychologist. And she spends her time throughout the day doing exactly what we're talking about. She's working with families. She's talking to the placements. She's making determinations whether or not students are ready to come back with teams. The teams happen out of the district, so she's going to all these out-of-district team meetings. And then she's bringing the information back to me, and we're collaborating with families. So there are lots of avenues to go through, and we do. We thoughtfully vet all of these avenues in terms of where the needs lie. And again, we're in a mental health, public health crisis here, so that's definitely part of what's impacting us right now, along with the pricing increases.
And I just want to add that, we don't get enough federal or state support to help develop the programs within district to bring these kids back. So if there were a greater investment placed in the schools so we could expand the programs, we might not have such high costs. So I beg you to petition your leaders.
Nancy, I have a question, and I fully understand, that the needs of some students, whether they're medically fragile and can't be in as large of a population as we have here, regardless of the skill of our staff, or kids that need full staff to be trauma informed, and there just are situations that we cannot, because of the size of our district, it's not safe for those students to be here. And so certainly it would be hard to imagine that these services would never be required, that we could meet the needs of all of these students. And I certainly agree that to the extent that we are able to build more programs like that, over time is better for students and is certainly more cost effective for the district and richer for everybody. But in the meantime, my question is, and I'm just out of, I'm my information is not current, but I remember conversations a few years ago about a special education revolving account. I don't know if that's something that was put in place, if that's a source of funding that we're gonna be able to use to offset this really large increase this year, or if that's something that the town has not done yet and something that we can look to in the future. Obviously, I know we have the circuit breaker, but I believe there was a conversation about a separate revolving account for special education so that we did not have to go to a special town meeting in the middle of the year, for example. And I don't know if you guys could explain what the current status of that is and whether or not that's an impact in this budget.
Do you want me to answer?
Please.
So we talked a little bit about that with the joint boards meeting, which I guess was just last week. But it is not in place.
Okay.
So there are several votes that need to take place to establish that revolving account. The school committee has taken their vote.
Okay.
The select board need to then take their vote, and then it needs to go to town meeting.
Okay.
Also at town meeting, something would need to be appropriated into that fund.
Right.
So the purpose of the fund is to be able to smooth out those years where you have rapid fluctuations.
Okay.
So the opportunity exists. We are not there yet.
Okay. Thank you. And I had to work last week, so I missed that meeting. So thank you. That's very helpful.
Anything more for Dr. Zaleski? Thank you for all of this.
Thank you.
A lot.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that I just want to go back to new business, item A, which is quick, just so I don't drop that off, but it's the HMS Club Advisor stipend change, and that was for you, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Sure, so this request really comes from Mr. Keller. What he is requesting is that we institute a debate club, and it's going to replace the Explorers Club, so it's not going to cost the district any money. It's simply creating one club instead of another club. We'll transition the $500 stipend from one to another.
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Amanda, second by Meg. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that passes. That brings us down to the HHS international travel. Dr. Kavanaugh.
So I can put this up on the screen for you. Looks like I might be able to do that. Let's see what happens.
There.
Okay, so I will also share these with you. These were sent, a very similar letter was sent to each of the families who are currently signed up for trips abroad. There are just over 70 students who are signed up for this at this point in time. And again, we are signed up with EF Tours. And so a lot of the people who are currently signed up for this are people who have been signed up for over 2 years. So they signed up for trips for the spring of 20, and now we're heading into the spring of 22. And we are in sort of that same place if you kind of look at the slide that's up there in front of you. So if you are traveling and you are able to, and you decide that it's just not right at this point in time, because we really don't know what it's going to look like to travel internationally. If a student or a chaperone became COVID positive while abroad, the entire trip keeps moving and that person stays in isolation, they can request that you have a parent fly to wherever you are and retrieve your child after the requisite number of days where they would be allowed on a flight. And so there are a lot of complications right now, and the countries that we are slated to travel to are all at level 4. And so Mr. Bishop and I are of the mindset that these trips should not be held in the spring, and I believe that the chaperones are as well. And so if you take a look at the options at this point in time, if we cancel within 110 days of the trip, and that date is December 23rd, so it's coming up very quickly, what will happen is that kids won't necessarily lose their $500, but they'll get a travel voucher for $500. Now, the truth of the matter is that our kids have $500 travel vouchers now in 2022 that they've been hanging on to for 24 months. And so the best that can happen with these is that they would be handed off to a younger sibling, or if you're a junior, you might be able to travel next year, or if you have a senior and no one else, you'd have to try to sell it to somebody else in the community if they wanted to travel in subsequent years with EF tours. The risk at this point in time is that you have to start paying for your trip. And so if you cancel between 109 and 45 days before the trip, you're only getting 50% of your money back. And so for a $4,000 trip, the risk goes up significantly because at this point, you're kind of on the hook for $500. If we go forward, you could be on the hook for $2,000 that you would be losing. And then if you cancel within 45 days of the trip, you don't get anything back. And I know that we went through this whole thing a couple of years ago, and I believe that the Attorney General kind of stepped in on behalf of students across the state who are all in this situation, but our kids still do have vouchers. And at this point, we are recommending that we just don't have these trips at all.
Can I add just some subjective information? I had a friend who was going to take a trip to Germany when it turned to level 4. They closed everything, museums, everything. So even if we said, let's allow this now, if the level 4 continues, even if they somehow managed to take a trip, there would be nothing that you could actually go to there. She ended up having to cancel her trip when the museums all closed.
Yes, and just so you know, if we get to April and these trips, and those countries are at level 4, EF will actually cancel the trip and refund your money. But it just feels like it's a great big risk because if you're not at level 4 and families are not feeling safe about going, chaperones are not feeling safe about going, there's a prevalence of COVID in a particular place, kids are going to be out of a lot of money at this point in time. I think $500 transferred to a voucher is the least risk situation at this point in time.
So we did receive 2 emails on this. One was more recent from a family who feeling was that if we are going to make this decision, that we make it sooner rather than having it canceled later on, so that to free up the money that they would get back to perhaps do something else. The other email that I saw was from a family that had questioned the school committee's authority to cancel a trip, and that obviously we are the body that authorized the trip to begin with. I don't know that we've ever had this position happen where a trip has needed to or be considered a benefit to cancel. As an aside, I do have some concerns about EF tours. That we have had this, a number of issues with international travels. It's disappointing to see them.
On the authority front, is the authority granted in our policy on travel, or is it granted elsewhere? And we have a policy on international travel that says that the school committee has to preliminarily approve and then approve. Is that it, or is it
I
an
would have to look that
NGL?
up, but I believe that across the state, if any student is traveling outside of the state or overnight, it has to be approved by a school committee. We would have to check that out. That would be a good thing to check.
We have a question. We allow questions on this?
So typically, we do not take
Oh, sorry.
questions, but if you just have a quick question, I don't want to, if there's something that would help us in the consideration.
Oh, I'm just curious, because our contract is with EF Tours, not with the school or the school. That's my only, and that may be my letter that you're referring to, because I'm just trying to figure out, I made a contract with EF Tours, I'm out the money. But EF Tours is going forward. So I'm just trying to figure out how the school interjects in that.
Yeah, so, I mean, essentially, you are signing on with EF Tours, but I believe that the difficulty is that the chaperones on the trip are Hopkinton Public Schools. So there's this kind of quasi-relationship that the school has with EF Tours while you also have a relationship with EF Tours. It does complicate things.
It is complicated because it's monetarily
I
with
know.
EF Tours, because they provide
Yeah.
chaperones as well.
So,
EF Tours goes on these trips as well.
so in terms of because we've approved this, does anybody have the policy thank you, do you have the intent to travel? Hold up there. All trips that come before us, when was does this have a final approval date on it? Do you have that in your?
It's in the packet, let me just see if the dates aren't on here.
So it does not have, it, this that we signed here in June, what level was that at? Was this,
This was the intent, I think.
The intent.
The intent to travel.
This is the policy itself.
so we have approved the intent to travel, and it requires a final approval. When would the final approval have come before us in a better time?
No less than 30 days prior to the scheduled departure date. Unless the activity could not have reasonably been planned in that time frame, in which case the superintendent will have discretion to approve the trip.
Yeah, so what the latter would mean is that if, say, robotics was able to schedule a trip at sort of the very last minute, they wouldn't be meeting the deadlines, but you could still approve.
Dr. Kavanaugh, did parents already sign the consent form, which is our IJOA policy, field trip consent, release form overnight? Because in that policy, the parents sign, it says, "We hereby authorize Hopkinton, acting through the superintendent of public schools or his or her designee, to cancel, reschedule, or alter in any other manner the field trip whenever he, she, they determines in her sole discretion that such cancellation, rescheduling, or alteration is required in order to protect the safety and welfare of said minor."
I will have to ask Mr. Bishop if those forms were shared with parents and if they did in fact sign them. I don't have the copies of those tonight. Are you looking at IJOA?
Yep.
Yep.
So in terms of options before us, if a decision is to be made in fairness to the group, it seems like making it after the 23rd results in a greater financial loss for the group. My understanding here is that $500 they get back in a voucher of some sort.
In a voucher.
So the problem, so for students who would be able to travel next year, they'd be able to use it next year if we approved a trip through EF Tours again. However, it leaves some students who are seniors who would need to, before what they did was they sold the vouchers, or how were those vouchers transferred in 2020 when the trips were canceled?
A lot of the kids, I think, were sophomores then, so they are seniors now, which is highly problematic. The vouchers are transferable. You can give them to a sibling, you can sell them to your neighbor.
And so are they vouchers that can only be used by school children? So you couldn't do an EF tour when you're 21 and use that $500?
I don't know the answer to that, Meg, but something makes me think that you can, that for any EF tour.
Because they have a broad range of tours, so I just feel for these parents
Yeah.
I
who
do
are losing
too.
$500
$500
if they
is a lot
can
of money.
do
So-
like a.
So the policy also requires that there be at least 2 chaperones on the trip. And we're saying that the chaperones are getting antsy and uncomfortable and may not be comfortable going on this trip.
Yeah, the chaperones are listed, or at least the people who started the trip, they're listed. But depending on the number of students, I think that there's typically like 1 chaperone for every 6 kids. And so those are all Hopkinton High School faculty, staff, sometimes it's a paraprofessional, sometimes it's the principal. But it is true that EF Tours will have a chaperone also, who's kind of works as like the tour guide, the person who makes sure that all of the kids get to the right restaurant and the bus gets to the right museum.
It sounds like there are some questions that we don't have answers to immediately. Is another option for us to vote to authorize that this be at the discretion of the superintendent?
I'm perfectly fine with that.
That way, if you can answer the questions you have, that we make a motion to authorize the superintendent. Is there a particular way to say that would be authorize the
Well, I don't know, I mean, I think there's the timing issue.
Well, but if the decision's got to be made by the 23rd.
Correct.
If we authorize Dr. Kavanaugh to get the answers to these questions, to make
Yes.
that decision between now and the 23rd, since we won't be able to reconvene.
And
Or-
Mr. Bishop and I
yeah.
are fine with that. I mean, the letter that you have here does indicate that he and I are
So it's-
recommending
yeah.
against the trip. And so, we can certainly look at some of the questions that you have asked tonight, but he and I are happy to make that decision.
I just want to say, I think it's been a terrible hand dealt to these students and these families, starting at the beginning of the pandemic. I know so many families who have been impacted by this, and I did follow the Attorney General's movements earlier in the pandemic, but I do wonder if there's any further action to be taken at that level, to look at this money that is just, I mean, if they cancel it in April or March, or, then the $500 goes back to the participants. If
Yes.
we, because of planning and any number of other reasons, and their deadlines, cancel today, they keep that $500. It's just so arbitrary. It's very frustrating and for everybody involved. So I feel for you. Yeah.
So shall I make a motion to authorize the superintendent to attend to this matter before the deadline of the 23rd?
Yes.
That's perfect.
So, motion by Meg, is there a second?
I second.
Second by Leah. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? It's on a record. Okay. So thank you for looking into that.
Sorry, when you get the data, could you maybe just report back to the school committee how many seniors are among the participants?
I sure can.
Please, thank you.
The number's very high, I can tell you that.
I'm sure, because
I
they've
don't
been
remember
holding
the
this.
exact number, so I wouldn't want to say, but
Yeah.
it's very high.
It is, it's terrible. All right, so that brings us down to the FY23 budget recommendation. Dr. Kavanaugh.
I'm going to see if I'm able to take that screen. Let's see. Look, it's gonna work.
Do you guys want to come sit up here?
I'm good.
You spent many years in this chair.
I think Dr. Zaleski must have been using all the Wi-Fi here.
It seems like that side of the room has better Wi-Fi.
It's so funny.
Jesse, are you still with a pulse?
We miss you, Jesse.
It's only 9 o'clock. Somehow
late.
it feels late.
Sure does.
This was not the day to get my booster shot.
Oh, no. Are you starting to
feel it?
I'm good.
Okay.
There you go.
All right, I think I'm gonna try that because it doesn't feel like it wants to load. All right, so I apologize, this is the FY23 budget presentation. As you saw last week, we were, I think, very streamlined in our budgetary goals this year. We were asked by the community to approach the FY23 budgeting, stressing fiscal responsibility, and I think that as you watch this presentation, you'll see that we have done that. At the same time, our goal has been to maintain our exceptional academic and extracurricular programs, to offer curriculum and instruction that meets the needs of all learners, and that includes academic, behavioral, mental health, and social emotional needs. And finally, this budget does in fact support the district's school improvement plans. So what you're seeing up there now, those are the enrollment numbers on which this budget was based. And if we take a look at this, it's very conservative. Our demographer, Arthur Wagman, gave us a variety of different projections, and this one here is for cohort survival only. And so what you're seeing at the end of the 21-22 school year is 3,998 students were projected, and that's really the end of this school year. Currently, we have 4,026 students in the district. If, however, we look at his numbers, the projections he made, not only with cohort survival, but also including new housing, at the end of this school year, he projected 4,024. And so it feels like he is far more spot on when we look at the new housing projections. And I wanted to include this next slide because I think that it's the one that is the most scary. These are the MSBA's projected numbers, and I think when we were going through the marathon project, MSBA did not have a full-on demographer like they do now. And so this is a person who looks at things like birth rates in Hopkinton, real estate in Hopkinton, new builds, cohort survival, does a really complex piece. And so if we look at where they project we will be in the year 2032, the MSBA is projecting 5,892 students. Whether or not we ever get there, who knows, right? We don't really have that information. But even here, the MSBA in this number right here is at 3,934 at the end of 2022. And that gets us the K to 12 numbers. It does not include the pre-K numbers, and our pre-K numbers, as you'll see in this presentation tonight, are higher than they've ever been. You know, typically pre-K is capped at about 80. But if we took the 80 and we added it to the 3,934, you'd get to just about the same kind of a place where Dr. Wagman was.
Sorry on that, Carol. I think it's important when we're looking at these numbers to know how they fit into the methodology for calculating enrollment projection. That's really what MSBA uses this number for. They're not using it for us to project 5,892. They're using it because the model that they used for calculating enrollment, enrollment number for the new school.
Correct.
Is they take the average of this 10-year period. They don't take the end point 5892. They're simply applying a percentage increase to each year that gets you to 5892, and then they have a formula for using that entire set of numbers to come up with the enrollment number for the new school.
That's correct. And so if you look down here at the very, very bottom of that projection, you will see that what they're projecting for the Elmwood School, if we were to build a 2-3 school only, they would be projecting 774 students, and if we were to build a 2-4, they'd be looking at 1175.
Okay, thanks.
And what they're kind of telling us about an 1175 or 1,200 student elementary school is that might be the largest elementary school in the Commonwealth if we were to build that school today. Or at least that's what we heard when we were on the call.
Wow.
I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah.
So I don't want to scare you with that number, but you can see that if we choose the 2022 number, we are spot on, you know, exactly where Dr. Wagman said that we would be. All right, so as we're going through the slides and Mrs. Rothermick is showing you the numbers, I want to talk just a little bit about where the money is being spent in terms of personnel. And so we've broken this into 4 categories for you: general education, student services, English learner education, and then program development. So at the Elmwood School, Mrs. Carver is looking for a 0.1 FTE wellness teacher. So she has 0.9, she wants to round that up to 0.1. And what that really means is that there would be 3 additional sections of physical education. So this person would not be teaching 27, but rather 30 sections. At the middle school, we need 0.3 FTE just for changes in sections. And what that means is we've had a decrease in enrollment in Mandarin, an increase in media literacy and music, and those are really generated by student need. And at the high school, 0.6 FTE, and that will be filled into various sections. It's built that way because we have student-generated enrollment, course registration, so what kids are interested in is what they enroll in. And so sometimes you have lots of kids who enroll in AP history classes, fewer in AP English classes, some kids want photography, and so we kind of backfill the FTEs after we know what students want. In terms of student services, and this might be something that's helpful when we think about what Dr. Zaleski was talking a little bit about tonight when she mentioned preschool, because when we talk about early intervention and the kids who are coming into pre-K, that's how we have a sense of how many students will be entering the district with some kind of need. So in the preschool, we typically have about 80 kids, and we are estimating that we'll be at about 106 students by April vacation. Technically, we are going to be out of compliance. And so for next year, we need to open another pre-K classroom, which means that we'll need a 1.0 FTE teacher, 2.7 FTEs in paras, because all the paras in that program work at 0.9, and then a 0.2 FTE in speech, so that we are able to meet what we are legally obligated to do. We'll need a 1.0 FTE in nursing. The nursing demands in the district have really grown alongside student need and also increases in enrollment. And then finally, district-wide, we need 5 paraprofessionals, and those are filled based on student need, and they can be anywhere in the district. And there is a reduction as well here. It's 0.8 FTE for the teaching of visually impaired students. And then we move to ESOL, so English for speakers of other languages. And I think what you're seeing here down in this chart is very helpful in understanding why each year we come to you and we ask for another ESOL teacher. If you look at the 2014-15 school year, the percentage of English learners in our district was at 1.4%. This current year, we are at 6.9%. 7 years ago, we had 48 students getting ESOL services. Today, we have 281 students getting ESOL services. And these numbers out here are just very interesting numbers when we think about our kids who have a language other than English district-wide. 7 years ago, there were 111 students who had another language as their first language. Today, there are 765 students in the Hopkinton Public School whose first language is something other than English. Right now, we have 127 English learners at Marathon, 80 at the Elmwood School, and 30 at Hopkins. So you can see that the caseloads are somewhere around 30. That's an awful lot for a single ESOL teacher. If we look at these trends, we can only imagine that we're going to have more students getting English learner education next year. And then finally, in terms of program development, we have a 1.0 FTE SEL director. Technically, she was hired for this year. She's currently working with us. The goal there is really to approach SEL at Tier 1 rather than using sort of a reactive and mental health approach. A lot of what happens, I think, now in our district is that when we start to recognize that students are struggling, then we give them the services that they need. But I think if we're proactive and we start to build that kind of instruction, true instruction, not something reactive, and we do that pre-K to 12, we hopefully will see fewer students with mental health or behavioral needs. At the middle school, we're asking for a 1.0 library paraprofessional. Right now we have a lovely library, but it's staffed by no one. And then at the middle school, there would just be a few clubs that would be added to the budget this year. And so at this point, I will let Mrs. Rothermick talk about the numbers.
Thank you. So what we're looking at this year for the FY23 request, the salary increase is $2,782,000 or a 3.7% increase. And the expense increase is $1,141,000 or 2.1%. So the total increase request is 5.8%. It's okay. I'm thinking I'm controlling it. So this is the slide that we always look at every year. Basically, schools are a service industry. It is really driven, salary driven, the budget. All our major changes typically come within that budget bucket.
I keep forgetting that's my job.
When we look at it from an educational program, you can see that regular education represents 53%, student services at 24%, and then you can see the peripheral programs that are really at smaller percentages, but also fixed percentages. And when we look at it by cost center, what you really are focusing on are your elementaries all, took a little while to put here.
Yep.
All your elementaries are around the same percentage in terms of education and education at that level. As you are matriculating through the school, you can see that it costs more for middle school and then it costs more to educate a high school student. The other big cost center, of course, gets back to student services. Moving on to salaries, the contractual obligations represent $1,398,000, and the staff request that Dr. Kavanaugh referenced earlier is $608,000. When we look at this in terms of the buckets, again, contractual at $1.3 million, special education requests at $328,000, that's the 9.1 FTEs. Instructional cost and enrollment growth at $129,000, 2.0 FTEs. The instructional program enhancements at $123,000, 1.0, and support at $26,000. Going through that again, student services, it's the 1.0 teaching, 7.7 paras, 0.2 in speech, 1.0 in nursing, offset by a 0.8 FTE in teacher the visually impaired reduction. Instructional cost, Elmwood the 0.1, middle school 0.3, high school 0.6, and ESOL at 1.0. Your instructional program enhancements, the 1.0 SEL director, and the support is the 1.0 library para. Moving into expenses, again, it's a $1,141,735 increase in our expenses for FY23. Again, when you're looking at the spread of expenses, student services, which are mostly required costs, building and grounds, also a fixed cost in technology. So most of our costs really are fixed. It's very little that becomes discretionary. When we look at the same buckets for our expenses, our contractual inflation and current services actually has a decrease. Special education at $1,094,000 increase, and instructional cost enrollment growth at $73,000 increase. The contractual inflation and current services, again, it's that $25,000 decrease. Student services really represents our out-of-district tuitions and contract services, and the enrollment growth really is transportation. So breaking that down, the contractual inflation and current services went down due to increased use of the bus fee revolving of $50,000 increase in the building use revolving of 100,000, offsetting the increase that was regular education of 46, building and grounds of 26, athletics at 11, and technology at 11. Again, representing a decrease. The student services is 1.4 million increase in out-of-district tuition, 38,000 in transportation, and miscellaneous other small increases, offset with an increase of 358,000 in circuit breaker. The enrollment growth is 1 additional bus. So putting both the salary and the expenses together, contractual inflation current services of 1.3 million, special education at 1.4 million, instructional costs and enrollment growth at 203,000, the program enhancements at 123,000, and the support at 26,000, again representing of those FTEs. And when you look at it in terms of the percentage, contractual inflation is a 2.5% increase, special education at 2.6%, the instructional costs and enrollment growth at 0.3%, program enhancements at 0.2%, and support at 0.04%. Again, getting back to our full increased request of 5.8%.
No matter how you slice it, it comes back to the 5.8.
It does.
One thing I'd like to see, since we were talking per pupil expenditure the other day, I would love to see per pupil expenditure this year versus last year. So what are we seeing in terms of what we're spending on a per student basis?
We can certainly get that for you.
Yes,
That would
we
be
usually
great.
put it in our presentation, so we can do it again.
I thought you were going to ask per school, because it looks like the costs vary by school too. I might be interested in that.
Well, your elementaries are all around 7%,
Yeah.
and then middle school goes up and high school goes up, and that's a very typical trend.
In terms of average, in terms of cost of tuition per student, though, I know we often talk about that as a school district, that the cost of
Oh, I
educating a student in Hopkinton is a certain dollar amount. But that number appears to vary quite a bit school to school, too. I would be interested in that.
We can look at that.
Might help you.
It's interesting.
One thing I will say, for our people watching at home, is I have seen all the budget documents have been put up onto our website after they come forward, which I think is great. If people need to help navigating the website, if you go to where the school committee tab is, you can go under the About and get to the budget there, and that will bring you to all of this year's as well as last year's budget documents. So that's helpful.
Nancy, can you just review the process too? I mean, tonight, this
So-
is
yes.
a presentation, just
I-
flashing forward since you brought the community into the
So,
conversation.
so tonight is obviously the first time we've seen the whole thing put together, from back when we met with the select board and appropriations back in September. We had a calendar that we agreed upon, which is also on the website for people interested. But we will have a meeting on January 6th, in which we will also have more opportunity for budget presentation with this, if there are any tweaks. And then on January 13th, we have our public hearing, which is an opportunity for people to come and engage directly back and forth with us, very different from our public comment period. So that's a big piece. And then we go all the way till January 20th, when we actually take our vote to approve our budget. It's then submitted on the 21st to the town manager. The town manager has, I think, till January 25th to consolidate the entire budget with the schools and police and everybody else in town and present that to the select board. And then it goes through, it'll go through appropriations and a whole bunch of public opportunities once it's an entire budget. And then we will vote at annual town meeting which is on May 2nd this year.
Great.
great to see. We have lots more opportunities. Any questions from either Mike or Jean from appropriations?
Well, I asked questions last week, so it should be much the same.
Actually, I have a curiosity question, not specifically about this budget, but in districts where they have a K-5 model, do you see a difference? I mean, maybe you don't know, it's not really a fair question, but in terms of the percentage expense for students, is that different in a K-5 model than in a model that we have where you're switching every 2 years?
That's a great
There's
question.
some- I realize, it's just actually, you guys can talk a lot about the Disney's on Elwood and curious.
Well, the challenge with Hopkinton, you spread it out to a K-5 neighborhood school, as a for instance, because with the population, it would be very difficult to do a K-5 with the numbers and finding land, as a for instance. So when you take it out to neighborhood schools, your administration would stay the same, but getting back to what Dr. Zaleski was saying in terms of special education,
Right.
there is that ability for program development within those schools.
Yeah.
So, I couldn't say that you're certainly saving. The model just looks a little different.
Mhm. Well, I know you guys are engaged in that work and you'll consider that as you go forward, but overall, this was very helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
it was great to see the culmination of everything we've been seeing over the past, X amount of meetings in one place. I think that's why I don't have any questions, because I think I've asked them
Yeah.
probably.
You brought us on the journey nicely with all the
Yeah,
different
exactly.
Dr. Kavanaugh, the enrollment projection numbers you showed for Dr. Wagman were up through this year. He also projected beyond, up to 10 years out, right?
Yes, so the numbers with new housing, he gets us, and the other thing about these numbers, we had him do a first round of numbers in 2018, and then when we got to the fall of 2020, was that right? Fall of 2020?
2019,
He had done one set of numbers
he had
for
done
us.
one, and then we had him revise it
In the pandemic.
in the pandemic.
Yes.
So the revision did bring those numbers down. They got more conservative.
Okay.
So this is where he is, post-pandemic, 47, 45 in the year 2030, 31.
But the budget that we built, the enrollment that we built the budget on was from the not with new housing, even more conservative.
That's correct.
I think my fear at this point in time is always, will we need to make adjustments after, as we see enrollments, if enrollments actually did add, what I think you predicted like 100 more kids between this year and next year on the other chart.
Yes.
Are we going to be okay? Because we were so lean. Like, your administrators did an amazing job of keeping the budget ask very tight. So I always just get worried. I mean, I appreciate the conservative approach, but we do also see the students actually coming here at a projected rate,
Right.
pretty accurately. So
And then the question becomes, can you absorb just under 100 kids across 13 grade levels?
just depends how they fall, right?
So that leads me to another question. When you do the budget, you do the end of this year's number, right? So like 4024, which is where we would be in spring.
Right, you plan
But
for
we're
where you'll be in
planning for the
June.
next year's budget when we're increasing throughout the year the 80 kids. Is there a reason why we don't project out to the end of the following year, since it's the budget for the next year?
We are using next year's numbers.
So you're using 4104? If we were looking at
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I was curious
Yes,
about.
we
Because we keep
are-
talking about the 4024 and I'm like, wait, okay.
No,
You're using
so
this
we
one,
are-
right?
we
This
are-
is the number we're using right here,
Yes.
4078.
Without the new housing. It's the conservative look, but for next year.
Yeah.
Right, okay, perfect, thank
So
you.
I think what I was trying to say is, if the estimate was that we would be at 3998 by the end of this school year, 21-22, currently we're at 4026.
Okay.
So the question will be, when we begin school next September in 2022, would we already be in excess of 4078?
Right.
And so
Right.
we'd have to go 52 more students between now and that point in time. And as I showed in the superintendent's report, which we always do, you just get those 3 or 4 kids trickling in.
Yeah.
You know, they just come to you in dribs and drabs throughout the year.
Thank you.
Other? Okay, so we are uncharacteristically over time here. Are you
So,
aware of that?
and I have a further wrinkle for you, okay?
Okay,
So,
bring it
I'm not- Yeah, so for consideration of the committee, we had, and it doesn't, we can still achieve the same outcome, but I think we have a process or governance issue to consider on the motion about masks. Because when I look at the actual wording of the motion, the action taken on December 2nd, it doesn't appear to give us authority to have revoted today. It does give the superintendent authority, however. So again, we can still achieve the same outcome, but let me read you the wording of the action. The decision on December 2nd to unmask said, it was Meg's motion, move to continue the mask lifting trial from December 6th to 23rd and reinstate the mask mandate on January 3rd, 2022, until reviewed by the school committee on January 6th, 2022, comma, granting the superintendent the authority to reinstate mandated masking at any time, comma, based on sharp rises in cases, comma, or through an emergency school committee meeting. And we're not an emergency school committee meeting.
So,
So that's my question.
so I would say as a body, since we endorsed, we are able to make the motions because we oversee that. If you would like to make a separate motion to reopen that item.
I just
would
want it
not-
to be
yeah.
clean, you know, and that's
Yep.
what I was advocating for when we actually
Yeah.
made the vote tonight, is that we have a clean process and not undue policy that we already put into effect. And our agenda item tonight was review Hockina High School and local COVID data and consider if any changes to the high school masking protocols are warranted at this time. But again, that agenda item itself ran contrary to the motion that we took December 2nd.
I guess I would wonder, I thank you for looking that
Yeah.
up,
Yep.
because I didn't
Yeah.
really remember
Right,
the
and I
wording,
did because
so.
you looked uncertain as to what the wording was.
No, that's great. I guess I wonder, we have the authority. The authority rests with us. We granted Dr. Kavanaugh to also have that authority. I did not internalize that we were abdicating authority by doing so. I thought we were sharing authority.
Not
Because we
advocating.
have
No,
the
no.
authority. It was given to us by Desi, I think. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
And if you are feeling like it's not within your purview, I am happy to say that I think students need to remask tomorrow at the high school. I feel like we are a week away from a major holiday, and I know what everyone is saying about sort of social, emotional, and mental health and all of that, but when we have kids who are not just academic kids,
Sorry, it's
but,
a process question. I'm not looking to
Okay.
open the debate again.
All right.
I understand all your reasons, and you have the authority. From December 2nd, you have the authority to reinstate mandated masking at any time based on a sharp rise in cases.
yes.
So that's all you have to do.
I think one thing that this highlights for me is, when we're really tired and
Yeah.
we're making motions, we don't always carefully vet the wording on our motions. And I think maybe one other thing to come out of this is that if we're going to make as serious a motion as this is, and we are going to have to in the future, probably in January at some point, that we should very carefully consider what we're putting down in the motion, right? Like this clearly was, I interpreted it completely different than what it says here.
But the motion was
Well,
carefully worded
yeah,
on
we-
December
we
2nd. Are you
wait a
referring to
minute.
today's motion?
Yeah.
This was very carefully worded, and it was worded in a way based on experience from the November, the prior vote. So are you referring to tonight's sloppy wording, or?
I think this particular one wasn't worded carefully.
It was worded very
I
carefully to
remember
give the
when we
superintendent,
passed it,
well,
we
defer to Meg, she made the
said, let's do
motion.
the same motion, basically, as what we did in the previous trial. We didn't carefully vet all the wording.
Well, regardless, we made a motion tonight that runs contrary to that.
So
That's right.
for,
I'll let
in
Meg
terms
speak
of
to it, too.
a process
Yeah.
piece,
Right.
so, because
That's what
we're
I'm
not,
trying to do.
we're
It's
we're
not-
over time, we do have more agenda items. If there is a motion that somebody would like to make regarding reopening, the vote that we took tonight stands unless it's somehow revoked. I don't, unless
Yeah,
there is a motion.
I'd like to
do
ask the
something.
chair to help us navigate this better in the
So-
future. Like, maybe we should have had this motion up, or the one making the motion tonight should have looked carefully at the motion that was already made. And we could have maybe not had to complicate our policy-making authority with authority already granted to the superintendent. Again, I just don't like that we make policy one week and then revert it the next week. And we actually structured this in a way that we didn't have to have done that tonight.
So-
Do you have a motion? I don't know.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to reopen it just so we attend to the motion we made back at the beginning of December.
Okay. So there is a motion by Meg. Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, so is there any discussion before we take a vote?
just to reopen.
Well, whether or not to reopen, it's a decision, a committee decision if we're gonna reopen this, because it's not on there on the agenda a second time. So,
So do you want to reopen tonight's
discussion.
agenda item? Is that what you're asking, to reopen?
Yes, and I don't think the outcome will be any different, but I think since we have granted her the authority and we said we wouldn't review it until January 6th, unless called to an emergency meeting, we should just abide by our words.
So you're making a motion to just do that whole thing?
Yeah.
Not just, that's it, you don't need to reopen discussion?
No.
So
Just
that-
to stick with
Yeah,
the
okay.
policy already in
So
effect?
typically, when
Okay.
we have a motion, we do have discussion.
Yeah.
That is the way that Robert's rules work.
Yeah, that's what we're doing now, I think. right?
Yeah, but, okay, so I thought you were trying to say we should not have a discussion on it. I do not believe that by stating that it could be done by in either an act of the superintendent or an emergency meeting of the school committee, that the intent behind in that discussion was to eliminate the opportunity for the school committee to have an emergency meeting to do this. When this was a couple days ago, people were starting to ask us to make a decision on this. This is prior to the 48-hour posting period. So we were able to put it on here for the 5 of us to discuss what we wanted to do. In terms of process, we already had a meeting scheduled this week. It didn't seem to me like it would be something that and you saw the responses that I sent to people that were sent to all of us, that it could be done, we could do it, or the superintendent could do it. So I would say, I think this is still within our authority.
Yeah, I understand, that's the reason why you did it. I
Yeah.
don't think it was necessary to do it, though, that's all.
Okay. So,
Uh,
I think there's a difference
all.
between not necessary
And
and
not-
no authority to.
Well, it
And
does.
so that's why, I guess, and its interpretation, which is Leah's point, I think maybe the wording is open to interpretation.
We granted the so, I don't know. Why would we revote our own policy unless it's a minority who didn't get what they wanting to overturn something and get a second
okay,
bite
so
at the
you're
apple?
saying that the minority being me, who didn't vote on it, I didn't vote against it, I didn't vote for it,
Okay,
had an agenda to bring this forward. But the
Well-
reality is, I never had the ability to make all 5 of us vote one way tonight or not.
no.
I brought it back so that the 5 of us
We
could
didn't have to
retain.
vote tonight. It
But,
just,
but 3 of us did, so it's a majority tonight. So I hear you saying, and maybe I'm.
well, I guess what
yeah.
drove you to override the decision we had already made? That's, I guess,
So
my
I
question.
didn't override the decision. I put it on the agenda for discussion and
Yeah.
consideration. I did not propose a motion because I felt the committee should have that ability. The 5 of us, because the 5 of us together hold that authority.
I have concerns for future decisions we make if we set a precedent tonight
Okay.
of undoing a decision that perfectly would have given the superintendent to come up with the same outcome that the majority tonight wanted.
So I hear your
Yeah.
discussion point. I have made mine. Are there different discussion points that people want to make before we take a vote on this?
I am actually watching and reading our CC thing from that particular meeting.
Oh, okay.
And one of the comments made was that we would be able to come back and impose the mask mandate whenever we wanted to.
That was a
There-
comment made, Leah, but it's not the wording of the approved action taken.
So what I am doing is I'm trying to find the exact word.
This
Can
is
I
not
make a
productive.
motion
Yeah.
to just, I think we voted to extend the mask mandate or to return us to wearing masks. But I just think it's important to pay attention to the wording that we used and to be honest about the wording we used.
And
That's all.
she's reviewing to get a,
But what
That's
is
not
she
the way it
reviewing?
is.
she's
that's-
reviewing the closed captioning from the actual meeting.
With the closed captioning isn't always right.
Okay, so we clearly have a division in opinion. I think at this point, again, we'll go by the majority rule of whether or not we're going to reopen this particular discussion.
There's a motion, right?
There is a motion and a second. So all those in favor of the motion,
We need a second.
Not to
Joe
reopen,
seconded
it's
it.
to
No,
just,
to-
can you clarify
to-
the motion, Meg?
No, I'm
If you're
trying
able-
to
you should-
clarify the motion.
So my understanding of the intent of the motion is to undo the vote we had and to leave this with the superintendent. Is that,
That is how
Accurate.
I read our motion taken 2 weeks ago, that she had that authority and that we wouldn't review it until January 6th. But again, that's just the wording,
But-
the actions taken.
I want to understand the motion you made tonight better so that we all know what we're voting on. You-
My motion was to reopen it
Yeah.
and authorize
Okay.
her as
So-
our previous action
so that-
suggested.
That is your motion, which is seconded by Joe. All those who are in favor of Meg's motion, please say aye.
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 All those who are opposed,
Nay.
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 So that stands the way it
Yeah,
was.
let's just be more careful in the future. I don't like when people are very opinionated about something and not, with it. The way the motion was made tonight was, I'm pretty sure we said this, so I want to vote this. And let's just be careful as a committee. Because
Okay,
I
so-
don't think it's good for us in our own credibility to make motions and decisions and then all stand behind them and then undo them. That's all.
So
Comment.
I
The
hear
vote's
your,
taken.
yeah,
I
the
get
vote
it.
is taken and the majority of the committee stands
Yeah.
behind the vote.
And either way, the outcome would be the same, but that's
It
okay.
would, but, I think people obviously had different opinions, and that is in some opportunities a strength of this committee, is that we represent different opinions and we bring them forward, and we walk out and we're okay because we made the decision as a group of 5. I hope that to be the case tonight as well.
Can I add one more point? I
Go ahead.
recommend everyone do go back and look at the December 2nd meeting.
To watch the meeting.
Because it wasn't carefully worded. I mean, we kind of were like, and what Dr. Kavanaugh said, and this, and it wasn't like, let's write down carefully exactly so that we're interpreting it all correctly.
That's fair.
And that's all I'm asking for. If we're gonna do important things like what you're saying, right? We should have everything written down in clarity so that we all know exactly what we're voting on.
Well, the same applies for the motion tonight, though. And the matter of record is the action taken that's published. That is Well,
The
agreed.
action taken
Fair
was
enough.
not voted on, but yes, it was published.
I think actually the record is the minutes.
Okay.
The actions taken, that was a document that was added this year, last year, I think, just to help communicate to the community what we did.
Okay, so I'm going to move on, if that's okay with people. Item F is the annual town meeting town warrants. They have opened the town meeting to take warrants. Are there any warrants, Dr. Kavanaugh, that have been recommended to us at this point?
I have received none.
May I just ask about the revolving account for special ed? Would it have to come from the select board at this point?
It would have to come from the select board.
Okay, thank you.
I am going to recommend, and happy to defer to others, that we do the review of the liaison roles at a future meeting, just given the time.
I second that.
All right, policy DJ purchasing, is that something that is of imminent need? Or is that something
No, it's not in there, not at all.
I would recommend, with respect to that?
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
With the liaison roles, was there something urgent that brought it up, other than the LPAC? So
Yes.
was there a concern
That
about
came
other?
Yep.
For me originally, because I have a difficulty making the HOP coalition,
Okay.
because the time is during the workday, and I didn't know if anyone else had a better chance of getting there. I just wanted to have that conversation.
Okay.
I can look to see if I can cover it or if somebody else can cover the next one.
Okay.
If that would help before we have the conversation.
Okay.
All right, let's move then into items by consensus. And if there are any future agenda items, they could be communicated by email.
Thank you.
So I don't wish to prolong things. Are we sort of tabling the request from
Oh,
public health?
okay.
It's not on the agenda.
It is not on the
Okay.
agenda. I do know that what was recommended was that it could be brought forward because it was not reasonably anticipated within 48 hours of when the agenda was created. While I support I support it as a general thing, I do have a little bit of unease bringing something,
Okay.
a vote on this unilaterally like that. Is that, unless there's somebody who feels,
That's fine.
although I do personally support that, it's nothing
Well,
against that.
even before we leave, I do want to clarify one thing. If you are fully vaccinated and asymptomatic, like high school age students, you can attend school. I just want to clarify that, because I know that we had said before
Thank you.
that we weren't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, so just to clarify that.
You mean after you travel, is that what you're saying?
No,
Oh.
I'm just saying generally. So if you are a high school student and you are a close contact, but you're fully vaccinated and asymptomatic, you can go to school.
Oh,
That question came up
Oh, you're a high
tonight.
school student, not a middle school
Oh,
student?
no, middle school student as well, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It just came about because we were having
Yeah.
conversations about the high school.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
not the impression I had when we had the discussion, actually. It sounded like all the
That's
close
right.
contacts were going to have to be out of school, and that was driving
It's-
people's decision to keep masks.
Mhm.
So thanks for clarifying that now. Again, that would have been critical to have during the discussion about unmasking.
Well, I think the question was close contacts in school or out of school, that was the question. Not all close contacts, it
Mm.
doesn't apply to all.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so items by consensus then.
Sure, Superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Motion.
Second.
Meg, second by Joe. All those in favor?
Aye.
And then is there a motion to adjourn?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Motion by Meg, is that what, and second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Aye.
And the meeting is adjourned at 9:43. Thank you all for hanging in with us. And we will return for our next regular meeting on January 16th. Thank you.
Thank you.